day, and welcome to today's Conversation podcast. Like any other day, today is a special day because we have a very special guest. I'm hosting prominent Lusaka lawyer and politician Kelvin Fube Bwalya. KBF is a prominent Zambian lawyer, is a politician, is a Christian leader, and also a very well-known media personality. He's credited to have supported the election and being instrumental to the election of President Michael Sata and Edgar Lungu, and now Hakainde Hichilema. In 2018, KBF launched an agenda called Zambia Must Prosper, and he also launched a book by the same title, Zambia Must Prosper. He encourages better governance, credible leadership, the role of the church, and for Zambia to attain prosperity, like the title of the party. Honorable KBF, welcome to today's Conversation podcast.
Emmanuel Mwamba. Viewers, good evening and nice to be with you today. I hope we are going to have a nice chat.
This is a conversation, so you be free just to land upon. KBF, Kelvin, you are Kelvin Bwalya Fube. No, you are Kelvin Fube Bwalya. KFB.
Right.
But you are known as KBF, Kelvin Fube Bwalya. Just explain that difference, that your name doesn't form the acronyms. Because the acronyms is KBF, but your surname
is
and
Bwalya.
your first name, Kelvin Fube Bwalya, you know.
My names are actually Kelvin Fube Bwalya. Fube liapa mutoto. Ngandefu akuti naadifisa. But as a middle name, I have carried it through from, let's say, nursery school, primary school, right through to now. But as I grew older in life and we started thinking of business when I was young with my father, my late brother in Mufulira, I started putting up names and trying to find which acronym was going to rhyme. So putting up KFB, FKB, what. Everything didn't seem to make sense. Yeah. But when I arrived at KBF, it had a ring to it, and also very fast on the tongue, and it stuck.
Okay.
So really, KBF is just a business name. But my father was Mr. Bwalya. So my surname is Bwalya.
Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense. A lot of people know you, like I stated, as a prominent figure in this country, especially in the political circles. You've made your mark as a very well-known, prominent lawyer in our country, and you've handled various cases. But, Tuye Kuntulo, who is KBF?
Now, don't tell her. I was born on the 20th of April, 1963, in a little town called Mufulira, Kopala. My late father, Mr. Eric Benson Bwalya, came from Chinsari, Pamushi, Pachivesa, Kwankula. My late mother, Mrs. Florence Kasomo Bwalya, came from Umbala. So I'm a mixed breed.
Yeah.
My mother was Lungu by tribe, my father Bemba by tribe. Vamaeva from Mapamuchinji, kwa Chief Tafuna. Kumbala.
Kumbala, yes. Okay.
So basically, they met in Mufulira, got married, and they were both working for Ronald Ross Hospital, one of the major hospitals, Mufulira. There were two mine hospitals, Ronald Ross Hospital and Malcolm Watson Hospital, which was generally a white Muzungu hospital. When I was born, my parents were staying in a hospital compound there was a compound of about 30, 31 houses right next to the hospital. And all the workers needed to be near the hospital because they needed to be on call. The goodness was also, that's where my Christian life started. Because number 30 hospital compound, was diagonally opposite the United Church of Zambia, where I began my Sunday school.
Ah, okay.
Very close. You can, where, if I'm sitting Panganda, I could see my church right across. But I wasn't born in the hospital. My mother, according to the story she told me, my mother was on duty as a nurse at the time. You know, the mine towns at that time, they were distributed into little dotted areas, and they had clinics across the mine town. So everywhere you went, there was a clinic. At that time, she was working at clinic number 6. Aba Ishiva Mufulira. Clinic number 6 sits between section 1 and section 2. Umusebo wa Yakukantanshi Secondary School. Gamulefu Mako Ochad. Mulea Kukantanshi Secondary School. There's a clinic number 6. I was born at the clinic. I think she couldn't get to the hospital in time, but I was born at the clinic, then transferred to the hospital. So I am the second born in a family of 6. My late older brother, Humphrey Kasonde Bwalya, was the firstborn. He's late. I'm second. My late sister, Diana Chongo Bwalya, came after me. Then another sister, Charity Chanda Bwalya. She's now Mrs. Mlenga. She's married to my good friend, Medstone Mlenga. And they're in the States now.
Oh, Medstone Mlenga. Reverend.
Correct.
He's also a reverend
he's now a
yeah.
reverend now. Yes. So they're in the States. After that, we had Bwalya, Patricia Bwalya. She's late. And then Kakasuli, Beverly Nonde Bwalya. So the 6 of us came from that family. My education started at St. John's Christian Church, the United Church of Zambia, along Kombe Avenue in Mufulira. Some of the friends I remember entering that nursery school with, those that I think are still alive, would be Dr. Elliot Kafumukache. He was, I think, recently retired from UNZA, but is a lecturer now. Most medical schools would know him. And one of the guys we traversed from nursery school right through to university together would be Elijah Chola Banda, State Council.
Oh, former last president.
He's in Kitwe, yes.
Ah, okay.
Those guys, I think, Papa Nensu Twatampirena nursery, those would know me from nursery school to date. And wherever I went to school, they would tell you. The way Mufulira was divided, they were still there. There were 4 schools that were considered Muzungu schools. There was Eastleigh Primary School. There was Ross Avenue Primary School. There was the convent. And then there was Mufulira Primary School. I went to Mufulira Primary School after nursery.
Yeah.
And these 4 schools formed a small cartel because there were still white children around there. You'd find yourselves limbi mulife 7 mu class I think the first time I had a black teacher in front of me was when I was in grade 7 or grade 8. The rest of it,
yeah.
So we grew up in that era. But what was good about it is we had to compete academically. And most
between
of the time,
the 4 schools.
Yes. Ngakwabama sports, the 4 schools would have inter-school. And Ngakwaba debate, the 4 schools would have debates. Ngakwaba Finshi, cultural dancing, just those 4 schools.
Yeah.
My school, Mufulira Primary School, was next to a school called, at that time, Ipusukilo Primary, Mary Moffat Primary School. Now it's called Ipusukilo. The convent has now changed its name to Mano Primary School. I think Ross Avenue has changed its name to Pamozi Primary School. Eastleigh and Mufulira Primary School have maintained their names.
Okay.
I recall growing up as a child, and grade 7. Something funny happened to me in grade 7. My results all the way out for me. I think 2 or 3 of us who were some of the brightest students per school, we were said to have failed. And we were made to repeat.
Wow.
But on the first day of repeating per school, that time we had educational teachers, and they call them district education officers, who were very honest. We just saw the district education officer come to the school, and he went to the headmaster's office. I think the headmaster was Mr. Otel at the time. I don't know what discussions were held. Then the senior teachers came to call us, me and a colleague and some other person. And then assembly was called. And we were told to go to the staff room. And we didn't know what we had done. We thought, now we're in trouble. So when we went to to assembly in the hall at Mufulira Primary School, we were then ushered in. And I think the students, the pupils, our friends, were told that when we arrive, they should all be shouting, Hillcrest, 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 Hill. And we didn't know about Hillcrest.
Yes.
David Kaunda Secondary School. We were just smooth boys. And the district education officer, I remember my parents had been summoned, and the parents of my colleagues and things, and they said, the headmaster was so proud that I think he called assembly to announce that these 3
didn't fail.
The problem is they were not put
on the list of successful candidates
because their names
appeared.
They were supposed to be going to Hillcrest Secondary School. Now, what the hell was Hillcrest? Then we needed some explanation. You should have seen my mother.
Yeah.
Apart from the joy and happiness in crying and everything, when the headmaster explained that I had to leave Mufulira to go to Hillcrest Secondary School, which was a technical school in Livingston, my mother said, "Mwana wandita padio kwale." You know mothers.
Yeah.
Find him a school here. At that time, my late older brother, Vakasonde, was already at Kantanshi Secondary School. So they asked me, "Ulefa ukuya kui?" And I said, "I want to join my brother." But they found that Kantanshi, the places were full. Then I said, okay, then let me go to Mufulira Secondary School because it was closer to home. We were living along Jomo Kenyatta Avenue at the time. And then they said, no, that school is also full. But the district education officer, I remember the man, his name is gone, but he was a very nice, chubby man. He said, there's a new school, but it's very far from where you live. Now, aba ishiba Mufulira, twali ku eastern side of the town. By that time, my mother had been promoted. She had become a matron in the hospital. So she needed to be near the hospitals. And where I was now being told I should go was Wutondo Secondary School, which meant you had to cross the whole of town from the eastern side, wapita mtown, wapita kumigodi, wapita section 1, 2, 3 mu Orchard, Pashinde Stadium, section 6, 5, 9, Kankoyo, deep into Utondo. I didn't know where this school was. I didn't even know what color uniforms they wore and other things and stuff like that. Luckily, my mother insisted. Umwana wandale ukokwini. Tale ya kumahiu Kristu. Kumulela ndanshifishi vifenifi ashara. My father was persuaded, and that's how I ended up at Butondo Secondary School.
Okay, okay. It was just a newly built school.
It was a newly built school, very nice furniture, and the teachers were accommodating. We found an Indian headmaster at the time, I forget his name, but a very nice disciplinarian. So we fitted in. Long story short, at Butondo Secondary School, I got to go to university. But before university, if you remember Mwamba, that time, during the Kaunda era, you had to go to national service.
First, yes. When did you finish grade 12 or Form 5
Form
at
5
the time?
at the time. We finished Form 5 in 1980.
Okay.
And then we had to go to national service. Now, the Copper Belt boys at the time,
Yeah.
so we came to Kafue.
For your national service.
For national service. And it was fun because then we met friends who we had been playing with, Muma drama clubs, my debating clubs, and the National Arts Council, and I was in a lot of clubs. I was always active, Kuskulu and things like that. So I met old friends, may he so rest in peace, like Greg Lungu, who ended up forming Zanase.
Yes.
I ended up.
Oh, you love the artists. The arts.
I've always been a dramatist, and we ended up with Kanengoki, Danny.
Yes.
We ended up with people like your former secretary to the cabinet, Chichi Munandi, Chichi Simon Miti.
Oh, okay, Dr. Simon Miti.
Tuale angala sana vena Simon Miti. So, but you know, the funny thing is, ngamwa ama results ngayafuma pa national service of Badechta. They would call a parade.
Okay. When your grade 12 results are out, your Form 5 results are out.
And they'll start announcing by school, by name, and your grades.
Yeah. Wow.
It was separating the boys from the men at parade.
Yeah, yeah.
So when the results came out, Vapunda, Vatweva, no, Imamulayaku University, they even told us, your quotas are changing. Mwambok munaveneno patari, mwabasha. When I moved to the other side, they said, you still have to be here another 2 months before you go home. Because Unza at that time, Tualei Sulamu, October.
Yeah.
And after the results came out, you can't go now, Facebook for another 2 months. So Tualei joined the football, the arts. So we joined the guys who were ahead of us.
Yes.
But hadn't left national service at that time. Now this is where we found football players like the late Benjamin Bwalya,
brother to
the older
Kalusha.
brother to Kalusha, Bruce Mwape, the current national team coach for the girls, the guy called Kocha, he came from Dola United, Jerry Koshinde. We formed a football club, a very formidable football club.
You could play football?
I still play football up to now. Even when I went to join the Law Association of Zambia,
yes,
we formed the Las Eagles. And we did a bit of traveling as
a football team of Las.
And some of the players I found, and they found us, some of them coming behind us. You find that we had strikers like State Council Steve Lungu. We had my young brother, this chubby chap who was our number 9, Lisimba. Our goalkeeper at the time was Greg Conhill, but now he's grown too big, he can't run.
No, you need to bring him back to football.
We formed another very formidable team of lawyers. And what we did as lawyers, we traveled in the SADC region. We went to Kenya, we went to Swaziland.
To play with your fellow lawyers.
With the fellow lawyers. We went to Zimbabwe, Namibia. So we had fun. So I've always been an active guy in the arts.
When you went to the university?
We went to university.
And why law?
Well, law is a funny story. Let me go back. My late father was a politician. I've grown up in a political home.
Okay.
And my late father was in UNIP. That time, growing up, he became, at the time he left, he was the regional secretary for UNIP North. There were friends like the governor, if I remember then, of Mufulira, Joseph Mutale. We had Batataba Sinkamba, Batataba Edward Mucheleka, John Chisata, Jackson Mutale, Chambeshi, Faustino Lombe, Puta. Those were their peers and friends. So Kwale Wafengamaya, a braai at this home, a party at this home, things like that. So we knew each other. But came a time, I think in the early 70s, when the late President Kaunda said that he was going to form UNIP as the only political party. And there began to be agitations within UNIP. Where's the democracy? And things like that. So the people that I've mentioned, and others I may have forgotten, Kalenga, Anani, and the others, they gravitated towards Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe.
Yeah, I think to put it in context to our dear viewers, President Kaunda gets independence in 1964.
Correct.
And 1968, he has another election.
Correct.
And the requirement was that first you go to conference.
Correct.
At conference, he was pushing his vice president at the time, Kamanga.
Ruben Chitandika Kamanga, yes.
And he was trounced by Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe.
Correct.
But then there were fallouts because then, Kapwepwe's supporters were harassed because after winning the party vice president, it was automatic that he would be the Republican vice president.
Correct.
And he replaced Ruben Chitandika Kamanga. And Kaunda, the momentous changes up to 1970s, that was a fallout. Mufulira was the bedrock for Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe. So I don't know where your father was caught up in there.
So you realize now that Mufulira became a hotspot.
Yeah.
So the names that I've mentioned, especially the late Tata, John Chisata, he used to host Bakapwepwe, Dionsenga ba Isa Mufulira. So wali kala kumurundu on the way to Mukambo. So whenever my father and his colleagues, we knew that it was a cover-up. The wives would be having a braai with us as children, but the men would be having meetings. I must say that I'm one of the lucky kids at that time growing up. I was around the early 10, 11-year-olds who would, sit on the laps of Kapwepwe, pull his beard and laugh around. But they would always say, Kangaleni. And we'd always be wondering, who's this bearded man?
With a stick.
With a stick all the time. And whenever he comes to town, my father and his colleagues must go where he is. And there were also some Indian friends at the time, Mufulira, like Vijay Solanki. He owned a very big supermarket shop, which is right opposite where ZCBC was. Now you call it ShopRite. But opposite was Vijay Solanki. That was a big shop. That Indian man and another man down the street called Kanabai Patel, who owned general dealers, Mufulira general dealers. He was support financially. Yeah. The Kapwepwe ring and things. So when the plan was, when Kapwepwe was to announce, when UPP was formed, it was underground.
Yes.
When Kapwepwe was to announce that I am the leader of UPP, and we are going now to fight the next elections, Tufunyepo Bakaunda, everybody who had been following and supporting Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe was to resign from UNIP. But you remember by that time, Kaunda's intelligence was quite effective.
Yeah, correct.
So they got wind of it. And I think some people were intimidated. Others grew cold feet. But of course, my father and his colleagues said, we have already made a decision. So they resigned and followed Bakapwepwe. That's the time when now the preservation of public security began to visit us.
Because then your life changed immediately.
Our lives changed. My father owned restaurants, shops. We were sons of politicians. We were respected in town. At one time, I think he even became the mayor of the town. Suddenly, because now you're fighting UNIP,
you're fighting the state.
You're fighting the state. My father, I think, was detained under the preservation of public security 3 or 4 times when I was growing up as a boy. Now, you ask me, why law? There's a particular visit we made. I think the last arrest my father suffered, apart from those when I was at primary school, this one I remember because I think I was 14, 15. I was in Form 3. Mwibu Kisheba Mwamba and those of us who are older. Akale, tatuale lemba mu grade 9. Tuale lemba mu Form 3, which is grade 10, to go to senior secondary school. So when I was in Form 3, I remember the date because I wrote it down. 20th September, 1978. The last raid we had, police came, picked up my father. They had already whipped and picked up all his colleagues. They were all arrested. All the names I've mentioned, they were all arrested, including my father now. We were about to get ready to go to school. The police arrived around 04, arrested my father and the colleagues and everything. And they grabbed, we had 2 cars outside. They took the motor vehicles. We were being driven to school. Long story short, long story short, but it was painful at the time. Because leaving home, Kofmaku 135 Jomo Kenyatta Avenue, Opotuale Ikara, I used to see our motor vehicles, Central Police, where they were detained.
Impounded.
And I would say, those are my vehicles. They're supposed to be taking me to school. But my father was in custody. So I wrote my Form 3 without my father. I got into senior secondary school, Form 4, Form 5. I wrote my Form 5 without my father. But the one thing my late mother always said was, this education will open doors for you. Whatever happens, school. So we passed Form 3. Well, I passed Form 3. I wrote my Form 5. I passed. Like I said, National Service.
So a recap to our viewers. During that period, there was a very big crackdown of the opposition.
Oh, yeah.
Nalumino Mundia on the West tried to form a similar party. Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe, the parties were subsequently banned.
Crashed.
There was a by-election that took place. Kapwepwe won without even coming to Mufulira. That's how entrenched his support was.
Let me tell you about that story now that you mention it. My late father and his friends, he was fighting against a man called Kamalondo.
Yes.
Yes.
The famous Kamalondo.
The famous Kamalondo. So because of the underground network that UPP had created, they were very strong strategically, punch. We never used to see my father Ushiko. He would always leave and come back at dawn. Kanshwale campaign. Wakapwepwe waishile with a big black motor vehicle. I remember. Vaile tandala kuli wa Chisata, kumurundu, wa John Chisata. And then they said, we'll have one swoop around town. He just drove through town. Ukuya fika kukankoyo. No ukuya shunguluka kukwacha. No kuwela ukupita vapita ya ku mine side. Kwa tumashungula kushinde side. Elo baisa ingira mukati mwapita no section 2. No kuisa pita no kufuma. He never campaigned, but his boys by his boys, I mean my father and the colleagues, they had already done the work.
Yeah, correct.
Without a rally, without a campaign, Bakapope won that election. Kamalondo was shocked.
Yes.
He didn't know what had hit him.
He was holding public rallies every day.
He didn't know what had hit him. But some of us now, as children, began to get interested. What is this game my father plays? Why does he... So the interest in politics began to build. But back to why law. This last arrest I was talking about, we as a family decided, well, my mother then decided, because for some time we didn't even know where my father was. Eventually we got word that they were at Mukobeko, maximum, in Kabwe. So my mother, I think, said, okay, to Alaya. And we got a car, I don't know from where, but we drove. My mother was driving. All of us were in the car. This time, I must mention 25. Nishka Kasudi, ka Beverly, non Bwalya, takala fialwa.
Okay.
So we came to Kabwe and saw my father. Now, I had a very interesting conversation with my father. That time, Tualia and Mawaya, there was no hugging. And my father was a very huggy guy. So I, like, why can't I hug you? No, that kanya kunonefasha. So then the pawaya. So in a very emotional state, I asked my father, I said, why are you here? Then he says, I'm a politics. One word, politics. It registered. Remember, I'm a child. That time, brain is a sponge. So I'm picking up words. I said, but who's going to help you to come back home? Then he says, we've got lawyers. The word lawyer for the first time was registered in my mind. So I said, what do lawyers do? Then he said, lawyers help people like me and these other prisoners. But if we are political prisoners. So I said, but what does it take for me to be a lawyer? Then he says, I said, I want to be a lawyer so that I can come and help you, so that you can come home. This is a child speaking. My father saw the determination in me and the questions I was asking. My brother was on the recluse side. He'd just be crying, but I would engage my father. Then he says, Ngawawelelam, uka kuli careers master or paper school. Go and ask him if you're a lawyer, and the subjects that are required. Then you can come and help me get out of here. That encouragement from my father, I came with it. But something happened on the way back.
Yeah.
After our visit as a family in Kabwe, we were coming, nampeshwe pale hapa waka Mulungushi River. Pale wa curve hivi sana pale. We're coming from Kabwe.
It remains a black spot
rained,
today.
and it was raining, I remember vividly. My mother was trying to curve, then go down to the Mulungushi River. And then there was another truck coming. So there were two trucks. One truck was trying to overtake, and my mother had the right of way, but now there are two trucks you're faced up with. And I remember vividly that picture. My mother swerved, and the car flew. Mwamba, we rode. The whole family was in the car. My father is in jail. My mother, with her 5 children, are in this car, rolling. I think the truck drivers realized what had happened. The villagers saw what had happened, and then they rushed to come and help. The car, I think, was a wreck. And I remember vividly when the car landed, my mother was in tears, crying, and all she started was with a prayer. Mwelesa, abana bandi, ngafweni. Then she began, Kasonde. My brother answered, Fube, Naasuka. Chongo, my sister answered, Chanda, my sister answered, Bwalya. My late sister answered as well. And she said, Mulife wino wonse. That's the first time she turned back to look at us. And she made sure we were all okay. Then the doors were flung open. It's raining.
Yeah.
Then passerbys, good Samaritans came. We were rushed to Kabwe General Hospital. When this news got to prison, because they had to tell my father now. Being the politicians that they were, they decided Mwala to shoot. my father insisted, I've got to see my family. If you're Mulenjeba, no. The commissioner of prisons, I think, was understanding. And I saw Vatataba Sinkamba, who was like very close to my dad, and Vatataba Jackson Mutali. Well, everybody who was friends to your father at the time was Badata, you know, now it is the way we grew up. So those three, my father and these two, they came to Kawe General Hospital. And all they wanted was for my father to see that we were being attended to. We had minor bruises, cuts, and whatever, but that we were okay. He went, hugged his wife, they spoke, cried. They were driven back to prison. Just for that.
Yeah.
They went back. Transport was arranged. We got back to Mufulira. I picked up when I went back to school. We had a careers master at Utondo Secondary School at the time called Mr. Chipeta. He used to teach history, geography, and civics. I went Kuriwa Chipeta. Natinende kuba lawyer. And you know, because Mufulira was a small town, they all knew the position of my father. So I explained. I had just come from visiting my father, and this is what had happened. And because of this, I've decided I'm going to be a lawyer. So he was intrigued by the amount of enthusiasm I had shown. So he says, okay, whatever kuba lawyer, I'm a subjects. And it touched me because initially I'd said I wanted to be a doctor. Remember, both my parents were working in the hospital. So my interest was hospital, helping people in Efiashala. But it caught me because he said, you don't need mathematics to do law. And I didn't like math. I said, oh, I don't need this subject. I know. But when I went back and I told my mom, I don't need math. My mother said, you still need it. You're still going to do it. One condition is na math. So anyway, we agreed, and so birth certificate, and I think the worst grade would be math. I think if I remember, I must have had 4 or 5.
Okay.
Mathematics, perform 5, because I just said, I don't need it anyway. If you're there for an iffy. So basically, that's how we go.
So when you went to university, law was a natural choice.
For me,
without
even when we were being given the first lecture, we were being told, we were in the lecture theater room, and we were being told, out of your social class, development studies, but we're being told the first 13%, you have to go to law, but your grades must be this high. So me, I knew my target yapo. The next, economics, public administration. Me, I said, I've got no business. My business is this 13%. We have to get in there. So we eventually got there, and that's how we became lawyers, really. But
do you remember some of your classmates?
Classmates? Oh, you remember those days we had very small class?
Small number.
Small number. So some of my classmates offhand, in our class, I must confess, about 6 or 7 are judges today. So you have the Vice President of the Constitutional Court today, Arnold Shilimi. That's my classmate.
Okay.
The Attorney General of this country, Mulilo Kavesha. That's my classmate. State Counsel Elijah Banda. That's my classmate. State Counsel Nchimanchito. Not Mutembo.
Yes, Mutembo is younger.
Mutembo Mwaichi. Nchimanchito. That's my classmate. Judge of the Court of Appeal, Mubanga Kondolo. That's my classmate.
Okay.
Judge Mary Mulanda on the Copper Belt. That's my classmate. Judge Gaudensia Mirimo Salasini. That's my classmate. Judge...
at least we have an idea of your peers.
Professor Shirimi, Sifas Lumina. That's another classmate. It was like that.
Yeah.
So we knew each other. And today we have a blog for the class.
Okay, you revived the blog.
We are still in touch. We talk, we laugh, and we like that. And it was a very nice class. And we had lecturers who pumped us to grow to be who we became eventually.
And the politics at the university, did you participate?
Yes.
Owing to your background and
owing to my background, when we were, the first thing you must understand is that time, the law students really were not allowed to participate in politics generally because they said you're lawyers.
Yeah, you have to abide by the law. You have to show by example.
But we became truant.
Yeah.
And we just said chive. So when we were running the law association, the law society, UNZA Law, as we called it, I was the secretary of the society for 2 years. Mulilo Kabesha was my vice secretary, the attorney general now. I think the president was Professor Sifas Lumina. We began to align ourselves to UNZASU because we realized, we are all students anyway.
Yeah.
So you have to be involved.
Yes.
So, but they always came to us to write the speeches, to consult, and talk to them nicely. So when our president, I remember vividly, was this guy who was a lecturer to South Africa. He got expelled, I think. I think he was the husband.
Professor Ansungule? No.
No, he was the husband to Laura Miti.
Dr. Hazlo Banda.
That was one of our best.
He was your president at the time.
UNZASU president.
Oh, UNZASU president. Oh, yeah.
We got to interact with Hazlo Banda so well that, dark corner meetings. And there were also publications that we used to do when we were students at UNZA. And I became the producer of one of the magazines, underground magazines, to hammer the administration. So we formed the magazine. It was called Chita Banging. And basically it was to bang at the administration. I remember the Vice Chancellor Mwanza at the time, and later Professor Mwauluka, they had to ban that particular publication because they realized once this publication came out every Friday, the students would be agitated. Yeah. And when there was bad food, there was shani nini,
blue showed, yes.
So ngamaya fati, Monk Square.
Yeah.
They had to call the police or whatever. I remember, I think at UNZA, we suffered 2 or 3 closures. But credit to our late former first president. We never closed the university for more than 3 months, at least during his tenure. You'd close for a few weeks just to calm down the storm. He never wanted the university's grading to go
be disrupted,
right? But also for the academic calendar to keep running. But just to teach you a lesson. Then he would say, okay, call the union leaders, send the cabinet office, close the university and things like that. UBZ by that time would arrive.
Yeah.
Abalia Copper Belt,
each
according to the districts and towns, go. 2-3 weeks, you receive information, either through ZNBC or some other information call. Your parents will simply start buying things and say, school. And you'd get back to school, back to normal. And the things you complained about would have been handled, and they would have been taken care of. The library, the books were there, the lecturers were there, everything was operating at full throttle. I think the maximum we were at university was about 3,000 plus.
Yeah.
Give and take, those on campus and those coming to do studies. Not the way it is now. I think we're compromising standards because that institution with the kind of infrastructure it has cannot take the 10,000, 15,000 kind of students.
The students it has now.
That is a problem. And I think politically for us as Zambia Must Prosper, we're going to deal with that when we get to the ground.
Well, you began to practice as a lawyer. You had a flourishing career. And you lawyers immediately become public figures because of the cases you handle, the things you argue. You immediately become public figures because, your names are always in the media. But when did you transition to politics?
My career started at legal aid.
Okay.
When we were called to the bar, I went to work for government. But I didn't stay long. I think I stayed at government. I didn't even get paid. Because to get paid and be put on the payroll takes about 3-4 months. Before that was done, a prestigious law firm called Ellis & Company. I met one of the partners for Ellis & Company in court. And even as junior as I was able to fight back. And I think a particular lady who came from Ellis & Company was very impressed with me. Then she decided to find out where this kid from. Then they found me at legal aid. They went and spoke to one of the partners then, State Counsel Mwenyalo Atula, is late now. Mwenyalo Atula sent one of my former lecturers, Dr. Mulwila, State Counsel Dr. Mulwila, John Mulwila, to come and speak to the then director at Legal Aid, Chalendo Sakala, who was my director then, that we are looking for this boy. Then they came to the office and, Taufola, you're still waiting for a small allowance from your mother and father, Kumuflira. Then your former lecturer sits in front of you and says, Valek Fuaya. I said, who? There's a company called Ellis & Company. Legal aid is opposite Kamala at the time, where there's registration of births and certificates. We were on top. So Dr. Mulwila is sitting in front of me and says, you should go and see my friend Mwenyalo Atula in town. I say, where? He says, what? On top of Times of Zambia. They were along Cairo Road, farmer's house. I said, I don't know where this is. No, you've got to go there. So I agreed. The director was in support of it. The next day I went. I had this interview. It wasn't really an interview, really. I found the lady.
We were headhunting you already.
Yeah, I found the lady I'd met in court, some Muzungu woman whose name I can't remember. And all she said is, and Vamwenye was like, Ikalap, Ufola Shingo called. So I said, I don't really know because I haven't even started. Yeah. And Mwenyalo Atula was state counsel, the late, was a very funny man. He had this pronunciation of Ellis & Company. He would always say Elish. Old school. Yeah. So he said, here at Elish, we'll look after you. So, you might. And they had all these sweeteners.
Yeah.
So they quickly bought me a car. Wow. Moved me to Kablonga and found me a flat, and my life changed immediately. So obviously my friends looking around were like, hey, hey, Chan, so. I never got a salary from government. Wow. Because before I was put on the payroll, I was already snatched. I stayed at Ellis for about 4 or 5 years. Then I was poached by Chifu Mbanda and Associates. State Council Chifu Mbanda. It's a funny thing because State Council and I have a relationship from church. Okay. We both attend Trinity Church, UCZ. So I thought, okay. And then, Ufolafie, you can become a partner, Shani, you're good at this and that. So I moved to Chifu Mbanda. I stayed 1-2 years. Thereafter, I said, I think not cool. I applied. That's how KBF and Partners got registered. And then we started off in 1992. Wow. That's when KBF and Partners was formed. And since then, we've been running that law firm. So I had this background. The training was good. Legal aid, Ellis & Company, Chifu Mbanda and Associates, and then KBF and Partners. And then we started practicing.
And the politics?
The politics really was when I was running my association with Chifu Mbanda. It was at the time when MMD was coming up. And Kaunda had decided, that famous press conference, Mufana Grezulu, bring the paper. This fella is signing. Article 4 now is repealed, and let these young men form their small parties. We shall meet you at the ballot, you know, that usual press conference. So when I was at Chifumu Banda, we started representing my good friend at the time, Benny Mwinga. He was Mazabuka MP.
Yes.
Late Joshua Lumina, Chikankata MP, and another person. They were supposed to be thrown out of parliament.
Yes.
For their association with MMD and things like that and whatever. We got injunctions. And then we were co-opted by the late president, Ichibumba. Levi Patrick Manawasa State Council. So Chifumu Banda, myself, Manawasa, State Council, Vincent Malambo, State Council, Eric Silwamba, we formed basically the core legal team for Bachiluba, and anybody now who was in MMD who was going to be attacked by this vicious party called UNIP. Now for me, if you go back, this is the same UNIP that had been arresting my father.
Yeah.
And I had made a promise to my father, I'm going to be a lawyer to defend anybody who's going. So although my father was not in prison at the time, anybody who UNIP wanted to touch, it took me back to
your father,
to my father, and the pledge I had made. And I said, no, no more. You can't have this same party just arresting people and arresting people. So that's how we began to defend the members of parliament in MMD and the rest of that's how we got into politics. That's how we met Bachuluba, we met Chitalusa Mpa, we met Newstead Zimba, we met, well, the whole crew, basically. Because every time they were planning things, Venadini Mungomba, Derek Chitala, Akashambatwa, they would always ask for legal opinion because they wanted to make sure whatever they were doing was correct legally and otherwise. So because of sitting in that group and learning off the elbow of these, you know, academicians and entrepreneurs, VJ Mwanga and the rest, and all the politicians that were now in MMD, we began to realize, oh, this is how you change government. So we began to learn. That's how I got into politics. Okay. Before that, I had never been a politician. Okay. No. Okay. My promise to my father was to defend anybody who I thought was wrongly incarcerated or, you know, being ill-treated, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a special segment here where, because we are celebrating Zambia at 60, we have a Diamond Jubilee. I think it's a special season for our country. It gives us an opportunity to reflect where we are, what we could have done better. And we have this segment where we look at the presidents, and I think that's where you will have an opportunity also to discuss Mr. Sata and Edgar Lungu, you know, personal perspective and your interaction also with President Hakainde Hichilema. Let's start with Dr. Kaunda, because the assertion is that when we became independent in 1964, we were far better than many countries now that have even leapt to become first world. We're far richer than Singapore, than North Korea, Vietnam, and even China. Our GDP per capita was far better. But these are first world countries, and we're among the poorest countries. There are things that Dr. Kaunda could have done better. There are things that some mistakes that he made. So through your lenses, we want to review our 7 presidents. So let's start with Dr. Kaunda. What are your views and perspectives?
Well, first of all, may his soul rest in peace. I want to thank Dr. Kaunda and the UNIP government at the time. One of the best policies they took into account was to have proper free education. I know that politically he can be blamed for a lot of things, but I'm one of those people, even with the arrests of my father, the arrests of his friends, and the rest of the UPP crew, the death of Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe, and others who've died, including my late father, I've never held a grudge against Hakainde. The simple reason was I didn't understand the complexities at the time. I was young, but this is a man who said no segregation in schools. And that is how some of us, starting from St. John's Nursery School, ended up at Muflira Primary School, which was basically an all-white school, but we found ourselves there. We were able to be taught by these Muzungu teachers, and we had this cartel of the 4 schools I mentioned, and we could mix and we understood. But we didn't play in their circles. When it came Mkwangala, tualea kuka mchanga, kubena mumbipiri. Oko tualea Mkwangala, oko tualea fu atugero. Tualea ku section 1, section 2, section 3, oko tualea kumanyava names like Renatus Mushinge, Webi Chanda, Joseph Kalava, now Keneo, Noah Chilufya, and we found those guys there. And we were at home, kuma section, kuka mchanga, because that was our crew. You understand? But Kaunda made it that whoever merited, let them get promoted. And that is how come my late mother was able to be promoted. And I think at the time she was being made night superintendent at Ronald Ross Hospital. And eventually she was brought to Lusaka here to come and study midwifery, and eventually became the matron of the maternity at Malcolm Watson Hospital now, which was the Zungu Hospital and Ronald Ross. This is a funny story about Mwamba, but I stopped ngana Fumaku University na elekero kwina ba Mayoku market because she had delivered so many babies, Mumufulira, that you could not walk with my mother without being stopped here, somebody bringing tomato just to give her, to thank her, some rape. And Ngabaya market, she hardly spent money. Because the women who she had delivered and attended to would always, oh, matron, and my mother would always be like, oh, woman wachinde tafiat, wetabaona ole nenda na matwala mpela fie. Banoko eba mpapishe. Oh my God, why'd you bring me here? You know what I'm saying? But the point is,
to learn service to mankind.
Exactly, and I learned that you could be maybe in the middle class of life, but you always had to have your roots with the people. And that's how I grew up. So Hakainde, during his tenure, taught us Ubuntunse. And he wanted the country to be united. I then later understood why he put up the one-party participatory democracy. Because I looking back, Batataba Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe was radical. And he wanted things done in a certain way. And I saw from the way my father, John Chisata, Jackson Mutale, Chambeshi, Edward Muchereka, Sinkamba, Simutowe, and everybody, when they were around him, wanted things done. But it clicked also that Hakainde was trying to fight tribalism because he saw Nalumino Mundia on the one side pulling the west south, and then Wakapwepwe pulling the northern circuit, and the country was more or less going to be divided. So Kaunda hit the middle, and keeping us under this one-party participatory democracy held the nation together. I learned that unity was good. But after 1973, after 1973, when now I'm going international, Nixon, as President of America, and Dr. Henry Kissinger, as Secretary of State of the United States, went and struck that deal with Saudi Arabia that oil dealings could only be done in dollars. We tumbled. And I recall the economy going on a downward spiral. Because at that time, now everything had to be rerouted via the dollar. So at that time, unfortunately, Hakainde was so entrenched in his leadership that he didn't see the international economics, but also because around here, he had already promised in his head, until the whole of Southern Africa is liberated, we are not free. I thank him for that principle, but it hurt us as a nation. So those countries, Mwamba, yes, they advanced because maybe they had peace, they had their own internal issues to deal with, but as we were like the front line of this southern region, and I recall there was no journalist who came from the BBC, from Reuters, from CNN, or any other news channel who didn't pass through here to ask for Hakainde's opinion about Southern Africa and the ongoings. Otherwise, he did not have the correct picture. This was a principled man from the beginning who said, once he said no, it's no. And for that, I respect him. Through the butchery door by the window. He refused to kulienama. Two, he said, until these other countries get liberated, we are not free. He made sure each one of them, Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, South Africa, all got independent. Then he breathed. So where he is, he taught us from a distance to stand on principle. Nang tishu peshani, at least help your neighbor, tighten your belt. What I didn't like, and what I think Hakainde would have done better, was he could have allowed new blood to get into UNIP faster, especially during the 1991 elections. He didn't need to go for those elections, but he saw the commotion in the country. We were supposed to have elections in 1993, but he said,
he got them earlier.
Let's do it. At that time, if Hakainde didn't stand and he had new blood, UNIP would have won. But he miscalculated. He made the same miscalculation in 1996 when
he tried to come back.
He tried to come back, but of course, the master dribbler, political engineer, FTJ, played with the constitution and the Nikuv register and the other things, and the rest is history. The point is UNIP died immediately after that. It is this sticking too long with your old friends and thinking tried and tested is better than having the infusion of new ideas and new things that Hakainde missed it. On that score, he could have done better. We could have been a different country.
Frederick Jacob Titus Chiluba.
Like I said, I met Chiluba when I was at Chief Mubanda, and we developed a relationship. We would meet, we would talk, and up close and personal, one of the most charismatic leaders this nation has ever produced. I think give him a microphone, you'd probably call him the Michael Jackson of Zambia. He had hit songs, but Chiluba on a microphone could convince anybody. Whatever he wanted to say, people would dance to it. I thank Chiluba for two things. One, opening up the country, obviously coming out of the one-party participatory democracy. The economy was closed.
And state-owned, no private sector.
Exactly.
Very limited private sector.
So he said, let's open up. And in opening up, he trusted too much. Big mistake. Because at that time, when privatization was insisted on by the West, he took it hook, line, and sinker. But you must understand, he was humble in his education. So he didn't quite understand what it meant. He trusted some of our peers,
so-called experts, and
to do that.
Fellow leaders.
Yes. And that is why some of our friends took advantage and misled Chiluba. taking some of our companies, abusing their trust and everything else, and not being patriotic to the country. It wasn't really the politicians who were wrong with privatization. It was the technocrats. They took advantage of it. The other good thing with Wachulwa is he allowed democracy to flourish. If you compare the amount of thick skin that man had in terms of insults, criticism, and things.
So he faced media abuse and what you now call hate speech.
Exactly, Wachulwa would never answer you. Niwani.
And would never unleash the police
No,
on
no,
you.
no, he would never. He would simply say that's the beauty of democracy. So for me, you salute such people because you're learning. Like I'm saying, you're learning off the elbows by watching. It's like you're in a classroom and you're thinking, okay, a leader. What kind of leader? What attributes can I pick from this man? And one of the attributes I picked from Wachulwa was never respond to stupid criticism. Focus on what you want to do and do it. Unlike today, where people are shaking by any statement Mwamba makes or anyone makes it, that's not leadership. No, but we'll get to that. The last thing over Wachulwa for me was he was able to bring in, which Wakaunda failed, young ideas, fresh minds and things. He had these limitations as to what he felt was what he could accept and couldn't accept. But at least we saw when Dean Mwamba, Derek Chitala, Akashambatwa, advising and leading and trying to, but they were trying to move the nation too fast. And Wachulwa was always lifting the handbrake and says, Tatulafika po, tekanyen. And then the young Turks thought, the old man is too slow. They branched off and formed Zadeco. And that's history as well. Yeah. But as a leader, you've got to see where you're going. He had his vision. And remember, after KK, he's the only president who's ruled his two terms.
2 terms, yeah.
And that's it. He made sure that what he wanted to do, he did. And by opening up the country, you remember, Nombanga wafunyapo UBZ tukalaini dashani, all he said is the private sector will fill in the gap. And he said for 1 year, there will be no taxes on buses, on this and that. Transport was done. Up to today, we don't suffer ngatu hapa intercity na quiz. Mayendere, because everybody was able to import buses and trucks and for free. And then transport sector was taken care of. It's not that you can't have a parastatal run by government. You can, but let it compete. In other words, for him, it is not the business of government to be in business, but it was the business of government to create an enabling environment for the private sector to do its business. And that he did. We must salute the man for that. Weaknesses, well, let me say he had his temper. Forgiveness was not his best attribute. Once in a while, he'd snap. And I know, I'll tell you this off the record, that I have an engineer friend, Jonathan Sininza. He used to run a company called Signtech at the time. And when he was trying to do the institute, the FTJ Institute,
he
was
one of the main contractors for PHI.
Correct, as well. And I think Jonathan came and hired us as a law firm to try and, you know, when the institute was being run amok and grounded and things. So they owed him quite a bit of money. And I said, before we sue, He was staying at Sevo Road at the time. So Jonathan and I made an appointment to Amukubamon, to Abasanga. And he chased everybody. He just wanted the 2 of us. And he says, Valmendo, you know that Akaka problem canon. And we said, but this guy, he's got debts and workers, contractors, and everything else. It was on him. Okay. Kapekanyine my passport. And Nala Pango Bulendo, we can meet in Belgium or London. And then we can agree on how we sort out this matter and things like that. And Jonathan and I were like, okay, as a client, I advised him, if the man wants to pay, there's no need for. But before that weekend could go off, the late Mwanawasa moved in and got his passport, charged, and everything just turned. And Jonathan was like, I can't wait. These people, just sue. That is how we took out the liquidation of the FTJ Institute. It hurts me because we had to go back to him and say, Shkulu, but chaps, you can't wait. But Uyu, he's also got a chain. And when we killed the institute, I think we took the energy out of him. I think he's never forgiven us for it. And he told us, but that's
a story for another. Yeah. Probably you would have accepted you. Levi Mwanawasa, who you actually then worked with at the formation of the MMD and defended Dr. Chilufya and others.
Levi Patrick Mwanawasa is interesting because my association with him began when my father was in jail. He used to work for a company called Cave Malik in Ndola. And they were the lawyers for some of the detainees, my father inclusive. So we would go to Cave Malik in Ndola with my mother to see and that's when I met Mwanawasa for the first time. And growing up and seeing, and then becoming a lawyer, and then coming to work with him. It was an honor because when you've been listening, this is the Mwanawasa before the accident, may I say.
Okay.
If you remember, before that terrible accident on the airport road. This was...
Yeah, to our dear viewers, in 1992, President Frederick Chilufya was going for a state visit to, I think, out of the country. I don't know whether it's Burundi, I have to remember. And the vice president, who then would be acting president, went to see off the president. But on his way back, there was a terrible accident that nearly took his life. Yeah.
That accident, I think, Mwanawasa was not the same. But the Mwanawasa before...
Because you had met Mwanawasa before the accident.
I knew him.
Yeah.
Even when he was forming Mwanawasa and Company, when he was at Tazama House in Ndola, he was with Happy Chama, the late Gust Chilando, the late Judge Charlie, and they formed Mwanawasa and Company. That was the company to go to. If you had a problem, especially to do with politics, Ngawaingira Mwanawasa and Company you knew. And
they were fearless.
Yes. So we learned again of them, and we realized, okay, when this man stands to speak and is on the floor in court, thinking on his feet, this is a fearless lawyer who's going to make submissions on your behalf, argue his case, and he knew how to prepare. And he was so disciplined with work that you'd admire him.
Yeah.
I also learned of the shoulders of State Counsel Eric Silwamba, Vincent Malambo, and people like that. And you understood that when you're behind them as junior lawyers, and they're submitting and making submissions before the High Court or Supreme Court, and there was a case, you really had to listen because it was like you're in class. This is like the law from theory to practice now, and you're seeing the law leaving your hands, and you're basically formulating jurisprudence, as it were. So Mwanawasa impressed me as a very, very principled man.
Yeah.
But because of his principle, he also proved a bit inexperienced politically, because some of the things that he did, he shouldn't have done.
Like?
Forget the EPIC, the economy he intended to fix and things like that. But to keep the peace in the country, having to go and arrest Chiluba, that didn't sit well with me. And I think this is a personal view I hold. I am not a vindictive person, but if a person is going to recognize this was my first vice president, this was a friend from the Copper Belt, Twafumabonse Kundola, and although Central Committee is saying what they are saying and trying to throw these, lots, as it were, and you're handed over the presidency on a silver platter, you don't stab a colleague like that. You don't. I think whatever their differences, on that score, may his soul rest in peace, I think Mwanawasa would have found a better way to handle Chiluba. That I found was not principle, it now bordered on vengeance. Whatever the differences were, that I think even for the country did not send the right signal of healing. But Chiluba was just human. But when he remembered his colleague and said, "Won't say imwepano," the only person on Demona can take this mantle. And because of the history we've shared, Kuti Aisa Nsunga, but is the person who turns to come and embarrass him and have all those lifting of immunities and the fights and the court, and then my young brother Mutembo Chito moves in, and no. For me, I felt it was a dagger in the back of Frederick Chiluba. It didn't have to go that far. I think the kind of politics I play myself, I'm very quick to forgive. I'm very quick to move on. Differences may come, but
people argue that if there was impunity, if there was corruption,
yes,
how do you make them pay?
Mwamba.
So how do you strike the balance?
Any former president, and I'm not just saying this because of Chiluba, any former president must never ever be treated like a common criminal. It doesn't matter your differences. You are talking about a man who held the highest office in the land. You are now attacking the presidency, as it were. There must be a way of saying, "Akaramba, ikaleni hapa, natusango tutuntu, twalachi tashani," in a very respectful manner. I don't think Chiluba would have argued, given the evidence per se. There should have been a way. If Mwanawasa felt he didn't have that to talk to Chiluba as a person, there were people with whom Chiluba confided in, with whom Chiluba associated. He would have used them, including the church. He would have gone there and say, "Mulande kona Chiluba over these issues." And I think would have had a very quiet process of saying, "Okay, if you had Lubeni," and suddenly some signing off and saying, "Okay, I think when you're dealing with a former president, for the sake of the reputation of the country, but also the office of presidency, that's how you handle it. Remember, there's no harm.
Your thoughts actually do reflect what I personally encountered when Olusegun Obasanjo, Nigerian president, who was AU chair at the time, in 2004, came. He didn't think that Mwanawasa should be pursuing his predecessor. No. He says this compromises national security. Exactly. It brings disunity in the country because the former president has loyalties, and then it unsettles the current president because you'll be always looking over your shoulder.
Correct.
But there are radical things he asked. How much has he stolen? How much have you found? And he gave him an example that when I became president, I was pursuing Sani Abacha. Sani Abacha had stolen, alleged stolen $4 billion. And we recovered some money. But to get that money, we actually had to sit with the family of Sani Abacha. We found this money. The beneficial owners might be all of you. So surrender $100 million, surrender the money, but we'll leave the family $100 million. Then Obasanjo got annoyed. He says, here, You haven't recovered anything. You haven't shown me any money.
Exactly.
So, what? And you've taken the man to court for $500,000. He pledged that he could actually pay the $500,000 if he could discontinue the case. Now, there I was present. I was around when that entire discussion. It didn't end well. You remember President Mwamba? I think he had the colleagues that were handling the corruption allegation. They just discouraged him that you'll be setting a precedent.
But here's a thought about Mwamba, and I think the viewers, you see, the injury and the insult to the office of the presidency and the nation, plus, as President Obasanjo mentioned, the risk to national security. Yeah. Because if, and I'm saying this is a big if Chilufya had still loyalties, say in the army, and they felt this is not correct, what would have happened? Yeah. The office of the presidency, or the president, must never, ever be brought into disrepute. There's a way that you handle a former president. There's a way. There must be this decorum, this amount of respect that you revere this office without having to bring personal issues. No.
The region ought to learn. We have seen what is happening in South Africa.
Exactly.
And, Jacob Zuma was even forced to create a political party a few weeks before election and even took away a chunk of the ANC support. Yeah. What's happening in Botswana with the previous president, Ian Khama, also. Same, not good. Then in the DRC, we're also watching Kabila.
Tension.
Sometimes, I think, I agree with you that we ought to handle the issues of the current president and his predecessors very well. Probably you talk about it when you come to Edgar Lungu, because who's in a similar situation.
Right.
You were very instrumental in the politics of Mr. Sata in the 2006 elections and 2008 until he was re-elected in 2008.
You're jumping Arabi. You're jumping Arabi.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, I wanted to, because now the country is seeing you no longer as a lawyer by 2006. And we now see you are thrust into the midst of politics in 2006. You are no longer a backroom operator. We are seeing you there. And Levin Mwanawasa dies, we have Rupiah Banda. And you actively supported in 2006 Michael Sata, 2008 and 2011. That's where I was leading to. But you can review Rupiah Banda. How did you find him, his reign and his approach to leadership?
Fatherly. Very fatherly. But wasn't ready to be president. Didn't want to be president, in my view. Was thrust into the role of being president by circumstances. The death of Levi Patrick, when I was the State Council, may his soul rest in peace. But Rupiah, I think, just wanted to be vice president. Remember, this was a retired man who was then fished from his retirement by Mwanawasa to become his vice president. Wasn't ready to be president. He was a diplomat. This is the era of Vijay, the Young Turks with Wakaunda. Traveled quite a bit, settled, exposed, but not ready for presidency, in my view. And I had personal engagements with Arabi right through to the 7th Republican president. I'll discuss that. But I found him to be a very nice father figure for the nation, for the stability of the nation, and as a transitional leader. We probably needed him because we needed to make sure that there was this transition between him and King Cobra. Remember, between King Cobra and Arabi, there was tension. They were friends, but there was always tension. And that's why they were able to joke about each other. You remember, Kanitundira and Kameni Nzapa Sasata.
Nisataka tu.
So they would crack jokes about each other like that because they knew each other's background. They knew how they related to each other. The goodness about RB was he was a Democrat. He also allowed the flourish of democracy. But in terms of the economy, he didn't do much because he didn't really have a blueprint. He didn't have a plan. He was thrust into a job, and all he did was he knew, I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but let me hold steady. Maybe if I get a second term, then I can have my policies. But in principle, no. RB was a transitional president. Let's leave him at that. Come King Cobra. Vasata was this enigma of a politician who I think wanted to be president at all costs.
He fought for it.
He fought for it. During the FTJ era, if you recall, we had Katere Kalumba, we had VJ, we had who was Secretary General. But you could see that MMD took a hold when Vasata became Secretary General of the party, because then he realized, I can swing this thing. When the third term issue came for FTJ, it was Vasata who was really taking the instructions off and executing them. But
and it appears he used the opportunity to knock off his competition.
Of course he did. And that's what I mean by being a tactician at politics, because you realize here's General Mianda, here's Kriston Tembo, here's who, here's who. They had to go. Bwana, I'm going to hit you from the left flank, and I'm going to attack you at the right. But when I cross the ball in the middle, you can't be there. I'm the one who's supposed to be scoring here. And when Zambia shouts, open fire, I should be the one taking the shot. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm Michael Chilufya Sata. And he played them. Now, some of us watching this movie unfold, we thought to ourselves, okay, here's a guy who's got a long term. He knows from where we stand and where the Oasis Forum stood, this third term is not going to succeed. But he realized, in the event this doesn't succeed, and I've knocked off the others off their perch, I should be the last man standing. Therefore, it will leave FTJ with no option. No option, Bwana. I should be the one to take that penalty. Unfortunately, when FTJ decided, go and wake up, Levi Patrick Mwanawas, you remember Vasata's first statement. Ejo twikalira pa Munsaka, Musumba wabwati. Walina abasenda. Nishinala ikalira muno. Na piamo. And that was the birth of the Patriotic Front. Because now the man felt, I have worked, I've been loyal, I've been dedicated to the cause, I've played my cards.
And I've fought his fight.
How could you play me? But he forgot. He was dealing with this political engineer who thought and felt, no, I owed Mwanawasa, more so our background, plus the accident. Let me repay this man. And that is how that came through. So when the PF was formed, initially some of us did not want to, we were torn, because you were advisors to the inner circle, legally, of the MMD. Now this, and we thought, how do we help this man? And what will happen to MMD? And how is this going to... When I changed, more or less, was when RB came in. Because like I said, RB for me was not ready to be president. And some of the policies and the things we began to hear, especially surrounding his family and the issues of business and whatever happened with his children, it then said, country first. That is when we began now to cross slowly in our minds, later physically, and we joined the Patriotic Front. But we realized also that the MMD had tricks up their sleeves. They wanted to win elections at all costs. So we went and now advised King Cobra, you can't win using these old methods. It won't work. You need to fight these people legally, you need to fight them politically, you also need to fight them strategically. So we went and formed an organization called Anti-Rigging Zambia. And that is what we championed with other NGOs to make sure that that didn't happen. I remember my office, I think, was slowly being turned into a de facto secretariat for the PF. And it didn't sit well with some of the members of the Patriotic Front because they thought Sata was trusting me too much with a lot of information and a lot of responsibility per se. But how did that happen? Sata said, look, I have lost elections. And part of it is I'm always being dribbled the last minute. And some of the dribbles are coming from within. So, Bwalya and Basebere, Bob Sichinga, lead this group and begin to formulate my next election. Now, we are moving from 2008 to 2011, and we had time. We saw what had happened in 2006. So we said to ourselves, okay, this is 2008. We've learned. This is how we're going to play this game. The first meeting we had was at the agricultural showgrounds. Bob Sichinga, Honorable, my very good uncle, was chairing the meeting. And we had all these academicians and Sata had managed to bring a whole lot of people together. We met, ideas were being thrown. In that meeting, there were two young men who were very, what's the word, aggressive. This is Mwamba Penny and Mwinyachama. After the meeting, they came up to me and said, when we were at Omelo Mumba Road, you remember what Sata said? I said, yes. And he says, we'll never come to this meeting again. Then I said, but why? And he said, if you don't take charge of this meeting, nothing will happen. These are old goonies who are too slow, and this is not how you win an election. These are young men who are eager, and, for them it was like life and death. So I said, okay, come to my office tomorrow. We'll sit, discuss, then we'll go and see the old man. They came up with these ideas, and they wanted to see how the 3 NGOs I was controlling could be used for this and that. Eventually, I went and saw the old man, and I said, these old men may not take you where you want to go, but we have this new plan. Then he said, come at 20 hours. I went and saw him in the night. We sat, the two of us, under outside his home. Yeah. And then he said, from today, you shall lead the presidential campaign. I'm going to leave the 156 seats now in Takavimba, but you lead the presidential campaign. He planned Mwampela. I think it can work. And that kicked off the campaign for Sata. And all I said to Sata is, I don't want your money. What I want is you give me your name. He says, what do you mean? I said, wherever I shall go, there shall be money. But you have to ratify and validate whatever I'm going to say. So wherever we went campaigning, wherever we went looking for funds, and whoever we spoke to, if they doubted, all I said, this is the number, call him. And when they called, who is there? That's my boy. Just do what he wants. And that's how we were covered. Yeah. Not Ngwe from Sata. The money came from the people we used to go and see and the politicians and businessmen we wanted to associate with. Eventually, we started running and had the campaign running. it didn't sit well with the full structure of the PF, because now we became enemy number one. Why is Sata going to this law firm? Why isn't he coming to the secretariat? And why is this and why is that? Eventually we told him we needed to change you. In other words, image building. This picture you have, this we have to. When we started breaking all that, the structures in PF felt we are taking too much control. But he was very obedient, he was very kind, and he agreed to most of what we did. I remember my good friend Charlie Mubanga, forgive the expression, we used to call him Charlie Sex at the time. Keza Zulu, you know, Chiluanama, myself, and others. He would simply say, if you didn't have a body. That was all Sata would say. And the first pictures we went to take of him, his family, was at a studio called Enzi. Now there's a there's a feeding station there. I don't know what has happened to that place. We took him for photos and things like that, and we changed his image and things and stuff. And then we started the branding of motor vehicles, campaign photos and things and stuff. The momentum was growing, but he did most of the work. I must commend him. He was on radio, community radios. He was out there. He was hammering the MMD, and eventually, come 2011, fast forward, Sata won the elections. But the funny thing is, when he won those elections, we were doing a PVT as anti-rigging, and we had the monitors trained, the agents trained, and everything. When we did our numbers, around 2030, myself, Honorable Bob Sechinga, State Council Mwamba Kapumpa, went to Omelo Mwamba Road. And I said, congratulations, our president. We found him sitting under the same caterpillar tree behind his house. Avena security, if I have won, what are you doing here? Why are you not at Mulungoshi? And I said, no, but from what we've done and our figures, Namu win, but it has to be announced officially. I want to see you at Mulungoshi, Babwadi. Otherwise, I don't believe. So we went to Mulungoshi. And lo and behold, around midnight or slightly before, the then Chief Justice Irene Mambirima, the late, may her soul rest in peace, came in and said, there are few constituencies remaining, but even with those, even if we gave them to Arabi, there will be no way of catching up. So we're going to declare. And the results were declared. Before they could declare the results, my phone rang. Who's calling? Amdala. Orikwisa. Natumwacheba tinjise kumulungoshi. Now, our police are a special branch. I don't want them here. You come back here. So I said, but how do I get there before we hear the final announcement here? I said, come back. So I told Vasichinga, Nava Mwamba Kapumba, I said, I said, no, but we've got to hear this. He says, well, the man says, the state has already moved. So he knows the results now. Mwamba moving, Vasichinga, Mwamba Kapumba and myself, moving from Mulungoshi to Sata's home at Omelo Mwamba took us 1 hour and a half. There were people like this on the streets. We were driving at 10 kilometers an hour. We took a long route. Before we could reach Omelo Mwamba Road, the road was blocked. We had to go and park at St. Ignatius Church and then walk to his home, meander through the people until we got to the gate. Then we told the police, OP or whoever was there, no, the president wanted for no. Who are you? By that time, state had taken.
There's no structure.
Now it's like we don't know you. So eventually I called Mukati. And then Vamayowana Kaseva came and said, no, so that's how we got in. And from there, this is now after 010 towards 02. He starts giving instructions. I want you to go tomorrow. Go and see Kanganja.
who was secretary to cabinet at
secretary
the time.
to cabinet, go and get government, you Bwalya. So I'm like, how? Who am I in the structure? I said, you go and get government. And what you do are the following. Celebration parliament. Take on there.
Yeah, the inauguration was set for
I want to go to Supreme Court. I think he had 5 conditions. And he was telling us. So I'm looking at Bob Siching and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm looking at Mumba Kapumpa. And they are saying, now go and sleep, because by 7 hours you must be at cabinet. True to form, by 7:30 we were at cabinet, and we saw Winter, State Council, Secretary General of the party then, and Guy Scott, and the rest coming in, but we had already arrived. And Kanganja came, and Fube, remember he was my lecturer from campus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you the one I've received phone calls for? I said, yes. All right, they need your team to the conference room. So we went to conference room and the discussions were held, and fast forward, PF is in government. Now, what was good about Basata? I'm saying this and I've gone into detail because that's how close we were.
Yeah.
And we learned a lot from this man, because this is one person, because of his longevity in politics, he was ready to be president.
He was ready.
He was ready. He had a blueprint, he had a plan, he had a vision, he knew what he wanted to do for this country. The one thing I learned from Basata over the time that we were together was you needed to know your country. He would give you details about who you're going to meet, where you're going to meet him, the color of the house he lives in, and his phone number. It became so funny that if he says, you would travel 2 kilometers off the road, call this number, so exactly what he would tell you, that's what you find. The man knew his people, he knew his country, he knew exactly what he wanted to do for the country. And that is why when it came to the infrastructure, which we also in Zambia Must Prosper are trying to follow in terms of our manifesto, is we agreed that there is no way a country can develop without infrastructure. If your infrastructure is not competing at global, international level, there is no way you're going to attract investment, no matter how good your policies are. Because when the investors come, if they cannot pick up a phone and call, the network is bad, their driving mobility is not there. They'll tell you, this country, we can't. Phone towers. And so he knew.
Yeah.
So Basata was ready. And when he began to execute his policy, the one thing I learned from Basata was he didn't care much about procedure. When he was president, what he wanted, he wanted.
Yeah, bureaucracy frustrated him.
And he said, if you're going to be waiting for these technocrats, they will first tell you they want a seminar, they want a workshop to discuss. Just tell them what you want. It must be done. It came to a point where we began now to relate to government officials in a manner that this is the kind of president you're dealing with. When he wants something done, do it. I think, credit to him, even at the Memorial Park where we bury our presidents, those museums that are built there, he wanted things done. He was always shouting at Yamfa Mukanga, who was infrastructure minister at the time. Why is it that this is not repaired? Why is this not done? Why is this? If I come here in 3 months and it's not done, I'll fire you. I think on one visit, he went to the Copper Belt, and the presidential guest house was in a mess. And says, but next time I come here, if I find it like this, you're fired. So you could see that to him, budgets didn't matter. You had to maintain a certain standard of things. And if you had to shortchange and move a budget to fit into what you want, it went for the road infrastructure. So when he went and said, link Zambia 8,000, He knew what he wanted. He knew the kind of roads he wanted. He knew who was going to do what. This is a president who knew that opening up a country means goods and services will be moved faster. And it also meant that the people will get their produce to the markets faster. You don't teach that. That you learn from practice.
Yeah.
But he also knew pamishi apa bemfumu. Sean Semuno Zambia, he could tell you. And if you say, no, tulefo kuyoko, and he will tell you in advance. And whether you're in Western province, he knew the country.
And they knew the people.
I think for any leader vying to be a president of this country, you must know your people. Basata knew his people. Credit to him. He had a vision. He knew what he wanted to do for his people, and he knew how to execute it. The downside, Muli Basata, was because he knew what he wanted, he started taking shortcuts. So some people would say he was abrogating government procedures, he was abrogating government protocol, and you remember, I think on two occasions, he embarrassed the then RDA chairperson, Bawiri Nsanda. There was a road, Kumikango.
Yeah.
I think he went to inspect, and they hadn't moved in the manner he wanted. There was a shout down there. Then there was the Matumbo Road, Chama Matumbo. They went, and then they had bulldozers. They wanted him to ride the bulldozer. He says, if you've taken money from these Chinese, I'm not getting on your bulldozer. He went to commission
He came to Western Province, I was PS.
You were PS. You knew him. So if things didn't seem right, he would just... But he was not diplomatic. PS, party official, if he sensed there's something wrong, he would embarrass you right then and walk away. So that didn't sit well with some officials. It didn't sit well with some of the civil servants, technocrats. And the other thing that I found was also on the downside was he, maybe because of his experience, he was a very brutal man. Is that the right word? Maybe brutal is too big. He was a very blunt man, and he didn't care what it meant.
Yeah,
so he said it. And whether he's on the podium, whether it's on a press conference, you saw in his appointments, Basata would appoint you in the morning. If a security breach or report is received by evening, you'll be fired. And he didn't mind whether you were on the road to take up your post, your arrival advice slip was with you. He didn't mind because to him, Walansevanya. And yeah, economically, to get the infrastructure moving, maybe again, with due respect, he wasn't very academically gifted, but he had a lot of experience. He didn't look into the details, the finer details of things. And that is how come some people took advantage and figures were inflated, blotted, and we got into a debt situation which we shouldn't have been in. I think for Basata, that's what I can say.
Okay. You didn't make it into cabinet with Basata. And that surprised many people, especially the elaborate explanation you've given and the insights and how much he trusted you with responsibility. Would you share some light?
It was an agreement. We had agreed that we would join him in 2016.
Okay.
And we had formed a core group which he wanted to transcend and move with in 2016. I think you remember some of the headlines where he began to say, my MPs are useless. And this, he was preparing ground because he knew that he had to change the team at a certain time. Lo and behold, 2014,
he died.
The man is gone.
Did you know he was unwell?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Me and his Vasevele, Bob Sichinga, Honorable, we knew. And I think on 1 or 2 occasions he confided that he wasn't feeling too well. But he made us feel it was not serious. And
it's something you would overcome.
Yeah. However, when I saw that it was serious, was just before he fired or dropped Winter Kavimba, Secretary General. He summoned us to a meeting. Now, this meeting was the last meeting I had with Vasat. He summoned us to a meeting at State House, me and my accomplices, so to speak. This is a time where he said, winter. And the plan is, you people must do this and help me, give me reasons why I should get rid of winter. I said, but you're the president, just fire him. He says, no, I've got to have political reasons. I mean, you should create the reasons. So we came up with a team of Richard Chandanyela, Julius Komaki, Mwenya Chama, Ben Siwila, yeah, and Kwali Murumendo Namu Mwishiwa Chanda. Mwamwitati die hard. Those were part of the boys in the team. My office was a planning office. The execution of whatever we planned was being done at Davis Chama's Avon Lodge. So whatever we planned, the press briefing to denounce the Secretary General was at Avon. I wanted to stay away from it because I didn't want friction and things like that. Eventually, when the plan was being executed, tension now began.
Why did you want to fire his SGM?
Intelligence reports and things I can't go into now, but things he had confided in some of us.
Because at that time, of course, the country didn't know that it could be unwell. There were 2 camps that had emerged. On one side, GBM, Edgar Lungu. On the other side, Winter, and the so-called cartel. So the party was riven in 2. Is that the period you're talking about?
Exactly. I didn't want to go into that, but now that you brought it up. No,
because that then leads us to what happens in 2014.
Exactly,
and
because
President
Vasata got intelligence reports, and he said, okay, now this is the Secretary General, a man I have trusted. How can he be having these dark corner meetings and stuff like that? So it became an issue of how do I get rid of him without it looking bad. So when the execution of this plan began, then he had a reason that the waters had been muddled and it was no longer clean water, and I can't see the Secretary General working with me. We gave him the reason. But this meeting I'm talking about, we were summoned. A phone call came through very early in the morning at my office, and all I heard was, Itaba Ichebove, Mwisekun. Before I could even put the phone down, there were 3 motor vehicles from State House. So I summoned the boys to come. They came to my office, and I said, Twala Mikonka, I'll drive the boys. When we got there, he said, there's somebody missing. Where's the Chama? Davis Chama. So by that time, Davis Chama was around Chilenje area. We called him. He was also brought into the meeting. So me and Davis sat together. The boys were standing. In that meeting, we found Kambwiri, Honorable William Sanda, Winter Kavimba, Honorable Secretary General, and I think Justice Minister at the time. We found Wamayowa Inonge Wina, Honorable, and we also found, I forget the last person, Guy Scott, Vice President. So when we got in, he started querying, why are you insulting the Secretary General? Now, I found that very tricky because, hang on, you're the guy giving instructions. Now you're putting us on the spot. And what do you want us to do? So Komaki, Julius, Kaila was very annoyed. He found the question a bit, then he looked at me as if to say, but mwatwebere ati mdala
Ni assignment ya
ni
mdala.
assignment ya mnama to push a shine pavantu pano, you understand? So I winked at him because I didn't want it.
Oh, so you were summoned to be reprimanded.
Yes.
So that you are loyal to the SG.
Correct.
Yet your daily instructions to undermine the
Correct.
SG. Ah, okay.
So we got there.
Sata at his best.
At his best. So me, I realized I can't speak because I was the one engaging this man.
Yeah.
So eventually, Kaila says, "Ababa SG Nwaba, you can't trust him." So he came out now with the reasons why and why they were doing what they were doing and things. So me, I'm watching. Davis Chama is sitting next to me.
Yeah.
Then it became a tit for tat between the president and Julius Komaki, Richard Nyela, Benson Suwira, and Mwenya Chama.
Oh, the president
on
interrogating
president. And then go, 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 go. So I said, boys, you're speaking to the president. Mama Inonge winner, guy scored. They're all watching this. It was a spectacle now. In the top room at State House, that office, the Oval one.
Yeah.
So me, I said, Munote Mwakuland, let me watch. So after the exchanges and tempers and everything calmed down, so he gave instructions. From now onwards, I want a united party in Efia Sharifa, get out. So the boys refused to move. Because they were saying, why are you embarrassing us?
Yeah.
And you know, that tension. So I stood up and I said, Mr. President, forgive me. Kaila, Fumeni Nabanen. So the boys looked at me and I said, Fumen. So the president was now looking. The boys started going. So he says, Imanin, na miewa na Fumeni mwofes mwakana, walialanda mwaumfu. Finish village tikapano. You know, he was still playing the game.
Yeah.
So I said, but President, Papa, it's okay. I'll deal with the boys. So get out. Yeah. So they went to the car park because they had come with me, stood near my car. So Twashala Padia, he gave a dress down also to the officials. No, be kind. These cadres, we need them and what and stuff like that. Then he says, all of you, get out. You've got work to do, your ministers. And in fact, now it came from
or
him.
maybe Winter and the group had reported you to the president.
Yes, they had. It was very obvious. They had.
Okay,
they had.
Okay.
Now, as I was standing up to leave, he says, the rest of you can go. So Davis Chama, you can also go. So Davis says, well, President, yes, but Davis, finish money for it. In a Central Committee and things. What value are you going to add to the Central Committee? Now to get out. So you know that bluntness.
Yeah.
So that's how Davis left. When everybody left, now there's 3 people. Now what I'm going to say, I wish Bawidin Sanda was alive. But President, Bawidin Sanda, myself. And then he says, Babu Adamunishan, Martin Fewin. And I could see from his demeanor, the man had gone a bit frail. He had changed. He's not the Sata we knew. I knew the man is sick. His voice was the same authority, but appearance, I knew there's something wrong with the president. Then he says to me, Kalain Punch. I was at a distance because the ministers were in front. There was some furniture behind. So he says, Sen Kuno. So I sat here, we were waiting Sanda, and he sat here. Then he picked up the phone to call the gate. And his question was, and everybody, whoever answered there says, I think all over Lefum or something. Okay, give it 5 minutes. Puts the phone down. Then he says, Winter and Now, I'm like, hello? We've just had this dress down. Yeah. But he's going back to his original plan. He says, Winter and Now, I need us to agree, Secretary General Ninan. I said, it's your call, you're the president. The Constitution says that I know. You all know all of our Secretary General.
He offered it to you.
Me. And I said, no. Then he turns Kulibansand. Mwamuna wawili karekana. So I said, well, President, can I explain? I said, wawili nsanda awekeli hapa. Bakuchinsadi. He's from Muchinga. Inendi wakuchinsadi. From Muchinga. Mwayaikala pampika. By way of convenience. But you're from Chinsadi. That I know. So once if we bekele pano tuliwena Chinsadi, Mumuchinga. So how will it sit out there that you are a president of a political party? Your Secretary General is also from Chinsadi and from Muchinga. For a moment, he took it. And he says, okay. So who do you propose? And I said, no. That's your prerogative. It's your discretion. It's your decision. Wawili, no, President, we can take some time and think about it. Long story short, that is how come ECL became
the Secretary General after Winter was fired.
Because he took a decision himself.
Now, Honorable Winter Kawimba was here where you are seated, and he somehow touched that matter. And he appears to have stated that he actually doubts if his dismissal even took place. He assumes it was a decision of other people. He even doubts if the letter came from President Michael Sata, the dismissal for him as Justice Minister and the withdrawal of his nomination as... and he says he's putting it in a book. I said, as soon as it is in the book, come, we reflect on it. But you are telling us that you had heard the president speak to this matter 2-3 times before it even happened.
Yes.
Okay.
That is how come we were given the instructions Gutampa akawawawa against Winter. We just didn't start.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to my big brother Winter. He may not have known in the background what was happening. But these instructions directly came from the president. And that's what he wanted. He wanted a reason to fire Winter. I don't know what intelligence, but he told me, I have intelligence reports on Winter. And I can't trust him. He can no longer be my Secretary General. Himself. And we were not doing what we were doing at my office or at Avon without the blessing of State House. No, we did not. But this is the catch. When that discussion is finished between me, the president, and Wawili Nsanda, he lifts the phone again and calls the gate. And they say, Winter has driven off. They confirm. Then he says, Bwalya ketiaba ichebo. The same people he had chased.
Yeah, and reprimanded.
So I ran downstairs, went out, and I found Kaila, Julius Komaki, Richard Nyela, and the rest of the crew, Mwenyachama, Benji, and everyone. I said, Vale Mfwaya, President. The boys were upset. They didn't want to go back. I said, President, Vale Mfwaya.
Yeah.
Vale Mkutusha. I said, Vale Mfwaya. So we trooped up again.
Yeah.
Trust me, the atmosphere was so different when we arrived back. All he did was he pulled out an envelope, put it on the table, and said, job well done.
Yeah.
Now go and continue. And I'm like, who does this?
Machiavellian.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, whatever Winter is saying, he didn't know what was at play.
Sincerely so.
Sincerely so. And I feel sorry for him. And for me, it was nothing personal. It was just that these were presidential directives.
Yeah.
And we had to play. And whatever I am saying, the names I have mentioned here, if they remember that meeting, even when I'm not there,
they'll say the same facts.
The only thing I would have loved was for Nsanda to have been alive. At least he would have vouched. And he would have said, yes, that was discussed. Because
no. The goodness with all these issues is the various facets. So you might have one side of the story. You might need other from the same event.
Correct.
For example, there's Doris Leah's book I was just seeing today, where Dixon Jerry says he has a perspective on what Dora was saying, about a matter. There are same matters, same event, same meeting, But you all have different experiences to the facts.
Right.
Because some facts you don't have the background, like you have put in this case, where you were caught, probably Winter could have complained against you that you were undermining. You were summoned and you were ballocked in front of the president. But they were unaware that your activities
the Cobra was playing. The Cobra was playing. And he played him very well.
Oh, yeah.
So by the time Winter was being fired and dropped, he didn't know what had hit him.
Yeah.
Because to him, the meeting he saw was the president that protected him.
Yeah.
Little did he know that when he left, the boys and I were summoned
even
back,
rewarded.
and we were rewarded, and we were told more fire.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, okay, these are politics.
No. You know, if you look at the profile of President Michael Sata, that is clear President Michael Sata.
Yes.
You know, he understood the politics, he was very well experienced, and he knew, you know, like you were talking about Chilufya and being a political engineer, they all had these
tricks
mastery.
up their sleeve.
Yes. Let's come to President Edgar Lungu.
Well, for the 6th Republican president, again, I think off the top of my fingers, I was probably the 4th person that was receiving a phone call from Lewanika House, where the acting president then, the 6th Republican president, was Edgar Chagwa Lungu, to be summoned to his home. This is after 01 in the morning, on the fateful day when the late President Michael Chilufya Sata died in London. Driving to Lewanika, I found this very somber mood. Now, when you entered Lungu's house, turning right after the stairs, there was a right door, which was like a very small room. But this is where I would call it his thinking, drinking room was. It was just fridges, beer, and books. Not a sitting room, a very small room.
Yeah.
And he had a specific seat where he would always sit with his legs on top of the chair. And somewhere here, there would always be a bottle. Yeah. Either a shot or a bottle, but some alcohol. So when I entered, he was trying to keep a straight face, but he was downcast. And all he said to me, he reached out and threw 2 documents in front of me. The lawyer. PF Constitution, the lawyer. The Republican Constitution. Sit down. So I said, so let's sit. I've summoned you here because of some sad news. Sad news. I said, what? No, Vasataba for London. Oh my God. And I'm thinking, another election. So I said, oh, when did this news come? Then he runs me through the intelligence briefs and the news, how it came, because he's acting president, he has received this. But he said to me, the legal team, we need to start brainstorming this. I am also aware that as we sit here, the vice president has also called a meeting of some people. Kufam Kudiwa Guy Scott. And the Attorney General is that side, Musa Mwenye, my young brother. And I said, okay, what do you want us to do? He was basically emotional, depressed, and then thinking, I'm an acting president, I'm SG, I'm this, and I think he had 3-4 portfolios, and he knew the limelight would be on him. So the issue was now the speech to announce the death of a president early in the morning, the issue of I was also now trying to process this and thinking, where's the information coming from, who was there, what happened. Before we got into the details of it, I think people started trooping in. And I asked the president, in cabinet, how much support do you have? He whispered to me. Central committee, he whispered to me, and I said, the first thing we need is this, second thing we need is this, and then I think we've got to think of the speech, because by morning, daybreak, this will not be a normal day. The Zambians need to know. And I think by that time, we were now looking at you, Mambayo, I mean you, Mwamba, Anthony Mukwita, and the others to draft something. I think by that time, people had trooped in and it was like Chirironomba.
Yeah.
But the Zambians out there were peacefully sleeping. For us, it was work.
Yeah.
That's how my journey with the 6th Republican president began. The night Sata died.
Yeah.
Now we had to make him a candidate. We had to get him across the presidency, because if you remember the constitution at that time, we had 90 days within which to go for an election. It's not like now where you've got a running mate who can take over. No, 90 days. And in those 90 days, fights began. Because in his mind, somehow Guy Scott just didn't want Lungu to be president. He had put his foot down. Whatever advice he had received from whomever, I don't know, but there were meetings being held at Guy Scott's farm. There was a fight against Lewanika House, where Lungu was staying, and Guy Scott didn't want him. Long story short, the PF spent between 21 to 29 days in-house fighting. Rules about the convention, candidature, and things. By that time, we had people popping up from the blues. My young brother Harry Kalaba wanted to be president. My young brother Chimbaka Mbwili wanted to be president. The son to the late president, Mulenga Sata, put his name in the hat. My young brother Mao Sampa, Luvinda. Brrr. So now it's a question of how do we get a candidate and how do the others back him? It was a fight, but we had to go into our books of what we have learned strategically and politically, maneuver. But we had to get Lungu, first of all, to understand, do you want this? Because if he didn't want it, we didn't have a fighting chance. He was like, and he'd always pass the ball. It's like a through ball. But let me poke power and things. So, but eventually we got him in line. And I remember being summoned somewhere in New Kasama by the late Bachikwanda, by Ellison Mulenga. These were friends to us, respectable men. I think Mayowa, Reverend Edith Mutale, some other prominent people.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're basically being put on the spotlight. And Owa Chikwanda says, the late, may his soul rest in peace, was Alifi Eko you, Waku Eastern Province. Do you want this party to be seen as a Bemba party? Can you go and tell these people that we have to rally behind this man? There must be this unison that we can also come, a president can also come from the other side.
Yeah, to our dear viewers, although there was no clear succession plan, and President Michael Sata, Vice President Guy Scott, who everyone knew couldn't be president because of his Scottish heritage, although he is Zambian. President Michael Sata appeared to have settled on Edgar Lungu, because remember you were saying he was Minister of Defense, he was Minister of Justice. He had just after dismissal of Winter become Secretary General of the party, and he was acting president.
Correct.
So although there was no direct reference that he is my successor, by his action, it appeared President Sata had left Edgar Lungu as his successor.
Also the manner in which he left him as acting president.
Please speak to that.
He was Minister of Defense, I think. and he was going for some function in Angola.
Yeah.
He was,
there was a SADC meeting.
Yeah, he was in flight, and the president's trip was then sanctioned, and he needed to leave. The president put his foot down, and he says, I'm not leaving until Edgar is in the airspace. So when the president, and I'm talking about the then acting president, Lungu, arrived in Angola, he was told, these other people you've come with can attend whatever is going on, but you,
go back.
You have been summoned back home. He didn't know why he was being summoned back home. But obviously, the president says, I'm not leaving until when the plane was in Zambian airspace, that's when he signed that I'm leaving this acting president to this man. And like you're saying, all indications were muchibembati apali umunwe, epali ivala. So basically, although he didn't say it, all indications were this was my preferred candidate. And I trust him enough not to give me the kind of problems I faced with other people when I left them as acting president. So that to us was enough a message to drive to the party membership to say, come on guys, this is how we're going to score this goal. So fast forward, rules were set, candidates filed, we went to the convention. But here's a problem. Guy Scott, in his mind, did not want Lungu. So we seemingly ended up with 2 conventions. But because we had already planned for Mulungushi and the delegates had arrived, we decided we're going to go ahead because the chairperson of the party at the time, Mama Inongewina, was with us. And I recall when we went to Mulungushi, we arrived the night before the convention. Bawili Nsanda was always in touch with me because he was responsible for mobilization, but also to look after the president and Mukupa, Samuel Mukupa. So they were always like nif, but ingakwaise if you legal to lekwita all the time. So some legal issues came up, and we ended up at my late young brother's law firm, Tutwa Ngulube. And I went to Tutwa and I said, Tutwa, in this thing, what do you want? He says, no, we must hold a convention and we must. I said, what are the rules? So we agreed. Then I said to Tutwa, okay, whatever we're going to do, there should be no backing down and there should be no withdrawing from Lungushi conference because that is the venue set. The Guy Scott team wanted us to go and move out all the delegates out of Mulungushi, Rock of Authority, and take them to town, where there was supposed to be a roll call and registration of delegates, and then we had to take them back. When I heard of those tricks, I didn't want to go into convention, but from that point, I said, I'm in. I dressed up. I went to Tutwa, I said, I'm at Trixie at Tampa. We called Honorable John Piri. I don't know where he is now, but he became ambassador, I think, to Malawi.
To Malawi, the former Minister of Education.
Yes. And I said, Piri, these are politics. We cannot allow whatever is coming. My sister, Honorable Sylvia Masebo, who was with Guy Scott at the time.
And she was chairperson of elections.
She walked in. And then she says, nope, everybody must leave. To fill out temporary registration outside. And I said, we've got thousands of people here. Buses to move them for accreditation. Back to Tuwele Kuno, it's midnight. How are we going to do this thing? So I told Tutwa, you are the commissioner for these elections. But John Piri, you are the master of ceremony. In this regard, disregard whatever Sylvia is saying. I pulled Bawili Nsanda, Samuel Mukupa, and the candidate, our preferred candidate, in this case, ECL. I said, the tricks have started. Now it's a fight. The moment we leave this convention center, we've lost. So we are not leaving. So I pulled your friend, Anton Mukwita, and I said, we are now going into National Council. immediately. Tutu announced National Council. So John Piri asked, can we move into National Council? They were yes. And the National Council then adopted the agenda and moved into the convention immediately. So from the hall where we were, resolutions were passed, votes were taken, minutes were taken, and then we said from here, immediately to the ground. Whatever is happening, after that, we moved the people to the convention now. After National Council, to the convention. Minutes were drafted. Your friend Mukwita went, typed everything, moved. We gave them to Davis Chama, who was announcing the whatever. Then Mayowa Inongewina brought the meeting now to order, and the convention started. Before we could start, a chopper came with paramilitary, fully armed.
Sylvia Masewa.
Again, Sylvia Masewa.
Chairperson of elections.
You can't go on with this. But after Twamukanina, as National Council, we resolved that we're moving into the convention. She still came. Before she could even make the announcement where she was making the announcement, the delegates were getting agitated. And they said, I think she was whisked by the police. They said, Mama, situation is tense. Back in the helicopter, Sylvia, Mama Inongewina called the meeting to order. The meeting started. We resolved. Votes were taken. Candidates were lined up from each of the 10 provinces. And we took a vote as to how we are going to conduct the elections. The candidature of Edgar Chagwa Lungu was the only one standing. The others were sitting with the vice president, hoping there would be a second convention. It didn't happen.
Now, the party has received a lot of criticism for that.
Yes.
That the conference was illegal, the conference just went with show of hands. Then they say, no, there were a lot of pangas and violence to prevent the other candidates. What do you say when you hear these criticisms?
No. I was on the scene. I was directing the events. I was talking to my young brother, who was commissioner of the elections, the late Tutu Angulube. Where Mayowa Inongewina was there. She called the meeting to order. The candidature of Edgar Lungu was the only one on the ballot. The other candidates thought Guy Scott and Sylvia Masewa could call a meeting, read the constitution of the PF. The person to call the meeting, such a convention, is the chairperson of the party. Mama Inongewina was the chairperson and she was with us. So she called the meeting to order. As for the show of hands, read the constitution again. It is allowed. When there's only one candidate, why are you going to start voting? He's unopposed. So what is the problem? There was nothing wrong there. And when the decisions were taken, the votes were counted, the commissioner for the elections, my late brother, Tutu Angulube, said these are the results. And he announced the candidature of Edgar Chagwa Lungu. Immediately I whispered. I was on the podium. I whispered, Kuliba Wirin Sanda, Nawa Mukupa, get this man out of here. Security risk. Immediately, motor vehicles came, zoomed out. Chagwa Lungu was back at Lewanika House. Before we could leave the convention, there was too many machinations, but the police came and told us, Muipitoku, there was a bit of, as usual in politics. But we got to the lodge where we were sitting. Akabwali, to celebrate, Fidiane Fiashala, exactly 2012 in the night, phone yard. Who's calling? Kazazul. General, not yes. We have a problem. I said, what's the problem? No, abantu baleva toka kwata convention mahilo. Not what convention? Not to push a convention. No. Where are you? Not we're still in Kabwe. Tukesa mahilo. No. The acting president wants you here. Looked at the time. Nothing shall no worry. Yeah, mwalaisa mudi if you ashala, how Keza was. So I said, okay. Give us an hour and a half. So I told the boys, it's time to move. Security propped up, transport prepared, fuel. We left Kabwe in the night, hammered those vehicles, straight to Lewanika. We're still in Regalia, to Afika. Straight. We found Walungu in that same little office
At Lewanika.
He says to me, you are a lawyer. We can't have two conventions. Now the only way is we have to put up an injunction. We can't allow that convention to take place. I said, we've done this before. Kasendamin. Are you sure? Not Kasendamin. I called my young brother Tutwa. I called the chap who became legal advisor to Skwana. And I also called another chap, all lawyers, and myself. And I said, get in the car. We went to the chambers. And we started typing. We had no secretary. Can you imagine now? This is about 22 something. And we are one finger. Typing by ourselves in the night. By 01:45, we had finished typing. So the documents were ready. I gave Skwana, take back to the acting president to go and sign the affidavits and things like that, and stuff like that, and whatever. He says, no, Mubikish Nadiaba, was it the chairperson or somebody, but we changed the names and they signed. By 2:30 in the morning, documents were ready. How do we get this into court? The rules are, courts are 24/7. You can follow a judge.
Your critics accuse you that you woke up the courts
Yes, I did.
in the night.
Yes, I did. And there's
now you are saying courts are 24/7.
Yes, there's no law against that.
Okay.
No law against that. I'll give you an example. If in a divorce matter between you and your wife, and this is an example, not that it's going to happen, your wife is a foreigner and she wants to take the children out of the country, you wait until morning when the flight is at 07:30. Once she gets on those kids on the plane with herself, she's gone, and the kids are gone. What are you going to do? You have the right to go to a judge, get an injunction to stay her departure, so that the kids don't leave until your divorce is issued and done, and it's no more. We have followed judges on the golf course. Was that
injunction the only one that has been gotten in those circumstances?
No, there have been plenty of injunctions gotten on Saturday, on Sunday. Judges sign.
Okay.
Why would a judge sign something which is illegal? Have they asked themselves that? This is a full judge of the High Court. Would she sign an illegal document? Of course not. She knew what she was doing. And she understood the gravity. There was a certificate of urgency attached to the application. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
So we went and now got the marshal, the chief marshal of the High Court, to open the High Court. Documents were stamped. Why were the officials waking up? They understood. They could be awakened any night, any time. They stamped the documents.
Well, you have said on this platform that courts are 24/7.
24/7. They can leave their chambers to go home, but they can sign any document anytime. So long as the file is allocated to that particular judge, they can sign. What we did is we filed documents in court, then we drove to the judge in charge then, who was Judge Chari. Remember Judge Chari from Mwanawasa and Company? Yeah, he was the judge in charge. We went somewhere in Ibex near the American embassy there. The judge allocated. He says, I can't deal with this matter. I'm allocating this matter to this particular judge. We then drove from Ibex Hill. We were driving in the night, early morning now, to where the judge was, somewhere, Roma. We found the judge because I think the judge in charge had called to say, I have allocated this case. There's a certificate of urgency, deal with it. The judge was in gowns, but she read the document. She said, stand outside, I want to read. She read, understood the gravity of the matter, and she said, come to the High Court. She came and signed in chambers, in the High Court. And then we took the documents and had them sealed with the seal of the High Court. That's how the order became official. The judge went back home. By 5:45, I was at Lewanika House, knocking. The candidate came down and I said, here's your injunction. But he asked me, you've got the injunction now, but how do we get it to Kabwe? Because we needed to save it. Because those people were still going to go ahead because they didn't know that there was an injunction. So we started now finding out who was going to be the commissioner for that particular
election. Since Tutua had declared the election.
Correct.
with conference, yeah.
Found out, and one of the friends I had missed out as a classmate, Jemano Mutareka Olungombe, a classmate of mine, was the commissioner.
Was
for
the newly appointed commissioner to replace Tutu Angulube.
No, for that second convention. Yeah. Tutu was done.
Yeah.
Being a classmate, we were on talking terms. I picked up the phone and I called Jemano. And I said to Jemano, you're the commissioner, where are you? I said, I'm in Kabwe. There's this thing, and I said, Jemano, I have an injunction. If that thing goes ahead, there can be no declaration. Because if you declare, we're going to have two candidates. But more importantly, if you declare, it means you're having two conventions. That convention has been blocked. No, send me on WhatsApp, but I also need the physical copy. I took a shot, I sent him on WhatsApp, and I said, the physical copy will be with you in the next 45 minutes. Okay. King! He rang back and says, okay, I've received. I said, you take that to my brother, Anthony Kasolo, who was with Guy Scott, and go and show him and say there's an injunction. If they need to go to make that convention go ahead, they need to fight that injunction. Otherwise, whatever you're doing there is inanity. So now I went to the candidate and I said, how do we get this across? Do we have a chopper? Do we have cars or anything? So he says, no, we've got a standby chopper at Polo Grill. So I said, Skwana, kafwale suit. Amdala nina kanat kafwale suit. You were working with me throughout the night, no alatwalech. At that time, my older brother, Mark Mushiri, walks in. And I said, Mushiri, position ni ine asha. He says, no, nana mushindika. Chopper ile tutwala ituweshi. No problem, that's not a problem. So Mark Mushiri and Skwana took that. I phoned, I think who was on the ground that time. Was it the Honorable Kampiongo and some other people? I told them, we have the injunction, this and this, but you have to pick a High Court official, marshal, from the High Court or sub-court to go and serve, and you must be protected. So I told Jemano, drive out of the conference. Go and meet these people at this point. They have to serve you this document. True to form, Mutale went there and the physical copy was served. After the chopper landed, the High Court official was picked, documents were served. So Mutale says, I've received this. I said, fine, now you know what to do. Show them. But the way the conference is going, let's just go through the motions. But I won't declare. I won't declare. And that's what happened. They went through the motions. I think my young brother Mao Sampa won or whatever. But Mutale says, I cannot declare the results because there's this injunction. In their hope of hopes, they were hoping they could find lawyers and come to Lusaka, fight the injunction, so that by the time the night was going through, they would have dissolved the injunction. That injunction stood. They didn't dissolve that injunction. So Mutale Jemano Kaulungombe could not announce the winner. So Edgar Lungu remained the sole candidate. And that's how PF moved with this candidate. And he became the president on the 15th of January, 2015, when the elections were held. So that, there was no illegality. And I want to say to the Zambians, you see, sometimes you think we lawyers do crooked things and things. No, this was within the confines of the law. And there was nothing illegal that was done for Edgar Chagwa Lungu to become a candidate and later president of this country. Nothing. And I'm glad to say that after that, the PF did
come together
and reconcile, and we moved as one team. In the last 21 days of the campaign, we campaigned together, all of us, under one banner with one candidate at that time in 2015. And that's how Edgar Lungu won those elections.
No, I spent time on this matter to allow you to explain, because I think it's been a matter of controversy, and I'm glad that you've shed light on the matter. Again, you didn't make cabinet. You had carried this campaign on your shoulder, and you didn't make cabinet. What happened?
My involvement was to keep the spirit of Vasata alive. The truth is, I can't say before I started working with Walungu that I was very close to Walungu. I can't say that, no. But on the night of Vasata's death and the way we worked together, I think we became close because, you know, there were phone calls flying around, we could talk to each other and things. But my job, as I saw it at that time, was to steady the ship. There are things in between that happened, between the Central Committee and the factions within the party that were going on before the convention, which, if you ask Mama Inongewina, she will tell you. Our young brother at the time, Steve Mikarile, was able to give us one of his lodges, I think the one in Jesmontine. That's where we kept the Central Committee after the burial of Vasata. And we had all these wrangles to iron out, and I worked very closely with my late brother, former PS, Home Affairs, Mlenga,
Dr.
Mlenga.
Chilesha Mlenga.
Chilesha, brilliant man. And that's how we held the Central Committee together. And our job at that time, as we saw it, was we understood the vision of Vasata. We had to keep this ship running. And we were not there to get jobs. I didn't go to Walungu to ask for a job. I didn't want him to give me a job because I thought, first of all, we've got a very short term. But what we didn't want to do was to lose power. And I thought, okay, 2016 is what we had discussed in Vasata. This one, 2015, they've already got a cabinet in place, and they were working. All they needed was the president.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And then he appointed Mayowa Inongewina
as vice president.
Yes, and that's how it went.
Yeah. You played another key role in 2016, but by 2018, clearly you had fallen out of favor. I think you then formed Zambia Must Prosper. Just tell us about that. And towards the election, you ended up working with President Hakainde Hichilema.
That's true. One of the things that I found was going wrong in the PF was, again, it became a closed shop. People didn't want fresh ideas. People didn't want new faces. It became a club, which it is, under the Registrar of Societies, but a closed club. Unless you were part of them, you could not be allowed in. But you see, for me also, one thing people must understand is, whenever I'm doing something, there's a principle involved. If I say I'm going to work with you, it does not necessarily mean that if you do something wrong or you want to do something wrong, I'll support you. No. For me, I think it's about the principle. And our difference with the then Central Committee, after we had ushered in by Edgar Lungu, and the other people of the PF, was that I was seen to be, what's the word, too smart. He can dribble us. You know, that we should be working such. Credit to my older brother, Walungu, he didn't harbor that. But the people around, although we had given them the power, and we had fought to have them back in power, they didn't see it that way. They wanted now to start branding some of us as enemies. But for me, I did have quiet words, and if Some of the Central Committee members are honest, including Lungu. I think the issue of this third term, I brought it up because I said legally, we fought a third term against Chiluba. If Lungu is going to go for 2021, in my view, in my humble view, this will be a third term. My interpretation of the Constitution at that time and today is that that would be a third term. So I said, I can't support this. And people wanted me to be on their side. And I said, no, I can't. On principle, I can't. Because as a lawyer, we are there to protect and defend the Constitution. The moment you don't do that, then what are you defending? What are you protecting? Which people are you going to say the Constitution is supreme? That was the difference. But then I also began to hear machinations within the party. I mean, my brother, Kaiser Zulu as political advisor and others around President Lungu, they wanted me to be as distant as they possibly could keep me. I know for a fact that I think President Lungu did earmark a position for me, and a letter was written to that regard. I know, because it was brought to my attention.
We heard that you were appointed as Minister of Justice.
Yes. And we had meetings, we talked. But because of whatever was going on in the party, next thing I was told, Lubinda is the Minister of Justice. I didn't fight. I kept quiet. Because for me, all I wanted was peace. Even at the time that I was being expelled from the party, I didn't take the party to court because I didn't want to. It was like in Kelvin Fube Bwalya. I had too much history, too much association with this party. I knew, and some of the things I'd done, some of the people enjoying or who enjoyed under PF didn't even know how they got into power. But I said to myself, as a Christian, you leave everything to God. Because it's either your time or it's not your time. And for me, I left it at that. That's why I didn't go to court. I think when Mumbipiri, my sister from Muflira, brought that letter 1 year after the so-called Central Committee had expelled me. Can you imagine? They expel you, no letter is given to you. They come and give you 1 year after the fact that, no, now you're expelled officially. I laughed because psychologically I had gotten over it. And psychologically I had moved on. And I didn't, but what they thought was, Alia Kukot. I said no. But what I also didn't want to do was to go and start begging to be a member of a group that didn't want me to be their member. So I said, you want this power, you want this political party, take it. But I knew the secrets of PF. I knew the cracks within PF. So when it came to electioneering, I knew that without some of us, there would be no one to advise Lungu in there. I knew. There would be no one to steer this ship. I knew. So these were guys who thought because they've amassed a bit of money, they thought money votes. Money doesn't vote. You can have all the money in the world, I'll still beat you at an election. You can have all the authority in the world, I'll still beat you if you don't know what to do at the ballot, if you don't know what to do in the campaign. So for me, I said, okay, mwachitefi. My words, and I still repeat, to Mumbipiri when I called her, and the PF at large was, if you mwachita, mukashara muri mwamoneni. That I'll repeat. I told them that. So when they expelled me, I decided I'm going to stay away. And I stayed away. And I wasn't willing to do anything. I was now building my movement of Zambia Must Prosper, eventually to graduate into a political party. But then people began coming to my chambers. And these people were NGOs, people from the UPND, the church, some from PF who are also disgruntled, and senior citizens of this country. They just said to me, look, you're a political animal. You can't just stay. Kafom Nobe. We have spoken to him and he has sent us here and things. I think the turning point was the relatives to Hakainde came. Mm. And I listened. I was given a piece of paper with names on the piece of paper. And I was told, if you know these people, these are your mutual friends. Now they were taking me back to the campus days. So,
did you meet President Hakainde Hichilema before that?
No.
Ah, okay.
No.
But did you know him?
Of course, we knew each other from campus. I mean, he came from the village in Bwengwa, and I knew how he arrived on campus. We were coming from Copperbelt. I mean, we were Kopala boys. We were town boys. He was from the village, but we mingled. We saw each other, and we understood each other. We had common friends. We had, and as campus would have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you started mixing in the same circles. Tugelo, stuff like that. So we knew each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we were not.
But you had not worked with him politically?
No.
No.
Okay. And I didn't think.
So when did after all these overtures from everyone, stakeholders, including his family or relatives, when did you meet him and what did you discuss?
After the last meeting with his family. That's when I told them, okay, go and tell him I'll meet him. I want to listen to him first. That's when they went back and told him, oh no, he has agreed. After all the NGOs and the OCIDAs, church and the other people, I said, okay, go and tell him we can meet. Then we agreed. And in terms of the meetings, where to meet, the venue was agreed. We met. I met Hakainde Hichilema 11 times. Like I'm meeting you one-on-one, alone.
Okay.
He insisted we meet alone first. Those 11 meetings, I was asking him questions. I wanted to know what his political philosophy was. I also wanted to understand the guy, because although we had mutual friends and we knew each other from campus, I wanted to know, who is this guy? What has he done? What are his plans for the country? And things like that.
And what were your impressions?
He's not a politician. No, he's a businessman. But he wanted power at all costs. I think he wanted power to cap the fact that whatever he had done, or whatever losses financially or otherwise he had suffered in the times he had been losing elections, he had to recoup something. I saw that he didn't really have a plan for the country, and he still doesn't. I saw that although he had the machine called the UPND, it wasn't very well oiled. And they didn't have the strategies to dislodge the PF. So I said, okay, I'm going to help you. And those were my words. I'm going to move my movement at that time, Zambia Must Prosper, as a movement, into this alliance. But I can't join UPND.
That you made that very clear.
Very clear. From the beginning.
The party, I mean, you hadn't formed the party. The movement was not registered.
No. But he accepted me as equals, even with the other political parties, and said, Mwana, you're my friend. You sit in the Council of Presidents, and you have the same vote, you have the same voice.
Yeah, okay.
It was out of those 11 meetings that we had, and I said to him, these are my terms. I know that the players from the background were insisting that the vice president of the UPND alliance must come from the other opposition political parties. I know that. And if, to speak, not that I brag, I was the forerunner because of our association, our friendship, and our history. But I didn't want to be part of his government. That I made clear. I didn't want any position. He was a bit disappointed because even when we spoke and engaged, He kept asking, but if you don't take up any position, then how are we going to work? And I said, but you've got people.
He wins elections, and the first people we are seeing around Hichilema, the first few days was you. Tell us.
Just like Wasata, after the results came out and the UPND alliance had won the elections, I was at home with my wife, and he goes, Mana, you've done this before, but also the secretary of the cabinet, I know is your friend. He's our friend. We're together on campus, Simon Miti. So I want you to be chairman of the committee that is going to take over government, like we did Kulibasata.
The informal transition.
The informal transition. So I said, okay, how do we do this? No, where are you? I said, I'm at home. No, please come to community house. So I went, and he gave me a list of about 15 people. You shall lead this delegation of the UPND Alliance, but you shall speak from a position of the Council of Presidents, and whatever government, whatever secretary of the cabinet wants about me, you should be the one to call me. We shall be talking, then you tell them what I want. I said, fine. On that list, we had people like former Secretary of the Cabinet, Leslie Mbula. We had people like Ambassador Sikazwe. We had the young man who went to Tanzania, Bwalya Anthony. We had 3 other former ambassadors, females. I can't remember their names. And just a category of it. It says, this will be your team. You go to Secretary of the Cabinet and take over. So I called Simon Miti. Simon, KBF. Shan, that there's a committee formed. You know what happens when these things. He said, no, it's okay. I also have my PSs and things like that. So we agreed on a date when to meet, and then we had to go and meet in the same conference room where I met Dr. Kanganja. Now it's the UPND Alliance taking over government from the PF. You can see the irony. I am now torn, but I think he was also playing psychological warfare on the part of B, because he wanted to make sure that they see that it's a former PF guy who's getting power on behalf of the alliance, which was smart on his part, but it was a stab on the part of PF. So we engaged with Simon initially in his office, then we walked the conference room, we found the PSs, Foreign Affairs, Home Affairs, then we formed the committee now for the inauguration ceremony. They wanted to know the list of list of invitees coming from the president, how the presidential portrait would be taken, the usual. I knew how the format was going to go, so we agreed. Those committees began to work, we dispersed them, and they began to work. And every report Simon Miti came up with as Secretary of the Cabinet, he came through me. Then I started taking him to Community House. The president-elect at the time, Hakainde, insisted that every meeting I had to be present, because he wanted to be sure that it's the 3 of us, Simon Miti, himself, and me, talking and agreeing on how this transfer was going to be done and smooth.
There is a famous picture of President Rupia Banda, Jakaya Kikwete, President Edgar Lungu, and some of you were in the background. What necessitated that meeting? Why was it important that they met?
We were at Community House. I had been summoned by my friend, the president, Hakainde Hichilema, and he was trying to get some information away from me, and we were trying to discuss on his list of invitees. The phone rings. On my phone, it's Simon Miti. Boy, where are you? I said, I'm at Community House. Ah, good. Is the president-elect there? I said, sitting in front of me. Ah, good. The president, meaning Edgar Lungu, wants to have a meeting with the other presidents and the president-elect. Can you facilitate that you come to State House? So I say, well, we're going through a list of things and stuff, but give me 5 minutes, I'll get back to you. So I switch off the phone and I say, this is Simon Miti. There's a meeting, former President Rupia Banda, former President Kikwete, I forget the other president.
From, I think, Sierra Leone.
Yeah. White hair and things, yes. And
representing African Union.
Correct. And President Lungu at State House. And they want to meet you so that I take you there now. He says, I'm agreeable to the meeting, but we can't meet at State House. And I say, why? As long as Lungu is in State House, I can't go to State House. These were his words. I say, okay, fine. And what do you suggest? Tell Simon meeting. The meeting can take place, but not at State House. They change the venue, and wherever they suggest, we can go. So I pick up the phone. I call Simon meeting. Boy, the president-elect is willing to have the meeting, but he says the venue must change. You come by, and you know, we are very close. We were. And the way Simon speaks, yes. We can't move 4 presidents because of, I said, Mana, you want the meeting or you don't want the meeting? These are my instructions. Okay. Ngakuli ba Arabi. I said, I think, he said any neutral place, but not State House. Okay, give us an hour. These presidents will move to Arabi. When we get to Arabi's home, we'll call you. Then you bring the president-elect. I said, no problem. And true to word, 1 hour, 15 minutes, Simon Miti calls again, boy, to Africa. So can you start off now? So I went back and I said, oh, Mana, Africa Korea, so we can start off. Okay, fine. Where are they? I said, Arabi's. Arabi, we can go. So that's how we zoomed. You call that road at what? Kafir Road? No, his road. Ring Road.
Oh, Ring Road.
Right
where
through.
President Hichilema from Community House, yes.
Ring Road. Right through to Kamwala. Then we get into Kafir Road. Then start going up again. And then we get to the
traffic
Bonaventure. Yes. Then we turn to Arabi's home. We arrive. He says to me, go and check who's there. I said, but we're already here. You think Arabi would harm you? No, just check. I went. Very embarrassing for me. A very emotional meeting. I went, greeted President Kikwete. Arabi gets, KBF, where's the president-elect? I said, he's in the car. He just says, we check. By this time, remember, he has no protocol. So he says, but you're my friend. You can play protocol for me. And whatever. And you're in the Council of Presidents Alliance, so I trust you. You're fine. I greet the other presidents. President Lungu is in a corner. And he has just lost an election. And he has just lost an election. But he has lost an election to his former strategist, former advisor, and a former confidant, who has now come to introduce a new president. It was emotional for me. I didn't like that meeting. I felt this. Yeah. And in my heart of hearts, I was trying to convey to the president, it shouldn't have been this way. We shouldn't have gotten to this point. But again, with the sense of les animali otola, my words, but PF mukashela muli mwamoni. At that point, my mwamoni had arrived. And the presidents were sitting, and President Lungu was in a corner, and I felt bad greeting the president, now to be former president, and ushering in a friend who is president-elect into this meeting. But I had to do it because what's done is done. It's what it is. So, is he coming? I said, no, I'm going to get him now. I just wanted to check who's here and what's going on. I went out. At that stage, had President Lungu considered, or that was a concession? No, he had considered. He had considered. Graciously for him, at least between me and Simon Miti and our talking and everything, he had considered. He was being very presidential about it. I must commend him. He was very presidential. All he wanted was certain terms and conditions to be conveyed. When I went to pick up my friend from the car to bring him to the meeting, he almost insisted, Mwana, stay with me. I told him, no. This is a meeting for presidents. I cannot be here. You discuss. But we are just next door. The Arabi, in his usual, you know him, KBF, you know Wapiri. Go to the kitchen with your friends and order what you can, and we'll be done in here. I said, no, Papa, we are next door. And the meeting, I can't speak intelligently as to what went on in there.
Yeah.
But I think 2.5 hours later, they emerged.
It took 2.5 hours.
Yes. They took pictures and whatever. No, Mwana come and I said, no, I'm not part of this meeting. You take pictures as president. That's the end of the story. And then we had tea, of course, with Wapiri, a few samosas, and we watched the animals on the other side. The meeting was over, and then we had to drive back. And we drove back. I had a conversation I can't put on camera with my friend, which gave me a bit of a fear. But it gave me an insight as to what was discussed in there. And then I realized, oh my God, this is the mind of my friend. And from that moment, I started drawing back. But fast forward, we get to community house, no mana, this and this. He briefs me, says whatever, what. Then the inauguration. And power now is transferred. Graciously, again, President Lungu, to his credit, very presidential, comes with his daughter Tasila to the Hero Stadium, hands over power, peacefully, without a squam, a complaint and things. But that meeting, brokered by the late fourth Republican president, may he so rest in peace, Waharabi, was very essential into what culminated into the inauguration. Because before there was a bit of tension. I was privy to that. Most of it I can't put on camera again, but it was ironed out. And Simon Miti and myself were in the thick of things, because the president-elect on the one hand had said, this is my man. Whatever you want, talk through him. So whatever Simon Miti wanted, whatever government wanted, Simon would call, Mwana, I need to go to community house. I'll drive to cabinet office, leave my car, get into his car, we'll drive to community house together, have this tripartite meeting with the president-elect, and whatever, Simon would drive me back, and like that, and like that. Eventually, all the committees worked, foreign affairs, dignitaries arriving, home affairs, security. The inauguration was a success, and the handover was done. But I need to say this, like I said with the other presidents. With Lungu, in terms of his leadership, I found him to be an easygoing president who wanted to accommodate the views of a lot of people. But he didn't have a very good team. One of his, perhaps, failures, which I hope now he may have seen, was that he kept some of the people who had ideas to move the country in the background, and he put people who he trusted, but who may not have had, forgive the word, but the intellectual prowess to have to advise him. So everybody was looking for answers from Lungu. I believe that when a president is in office, he needs a pool where he can draw ideas from. Unfortunately, there were very few people within Lungu's cabinet that had those ideas. They were just ordinary politicians who wanted to get by. Now, in the 21st century, you don't need that kind of leadership. You need every brain on the cabinet table inputting into the presidential mind, so that when the president takes a decision, it's a well-rounded view of what the problem is. Whatever cab memo is taken there, it doesn't have these connotations of personal gain from a ministerial perspective or from a procurement perspective and things, it became an issue. But Walungu allowed too much freedom. And I think that's where some of the players took advantage and played. Some of the things that happened under the watch of the 6th Republican President were not his fault. It was the players around. But you see, the problem with politics is the buck stops with the head. And that's the problem with politics. So people tend to think, no, but he couldn't supervise, he was weak. And that is a very unfortunate criticism. He was just trying to be a Democrat, and he was trying to be available for everybody. I think with hindsight, he could have done better. But in terms of relations, international relations, in terms of public image, I think he gave us an image of a unifying figure. And also because of the way he came into power, he wanted to unite the country. He wanted to unite the party. And he didn't have any enemies, perceived or otherwise, except for political adversaries, as in the UPND or other political parties who were there. But within the PF, he tried. But from day one, I knew that he was being fought by some of the candidates who wanted to stand in 2014, remember? And some of them who didn't have enough respect for him because they had this perceived impression about him. And for some of us, it was like, it was you guys who gave us this candidate. Again, it started backfiring on our side. And yet we had all these senior citizens advising us, some of them friends to the late Sata, saying, just let him, help him, and things like that. So I think he was a very good unifier, so to speak. And as a person, you can't fault Walungu for being open. No, he tried. But some people were streetwise. And when you've got people who are streetwise, they can beat you to the game because they know your weaknesses before you understand them. And they did things which were for their benefit, unfortunately.
As we begin to, before we close, President Hakainde Hichilema becomes president.
Yes.
He appoints alliance members as ministers. You have Charles Milupi as Minister of Housing, and you have Felix Mtati as technology. And your name is missing. And there was, you did so much, people saw you carry that cross. Of course, Hichilema himself had been carrying it for 15 years. But again, they expected you to be on that lineup. What happened?
Like I said, I told my friend I didn't want to belong to his cabinet from inception.
Okay.
One of the biggest mistakes Hakainde Hichilema made towards me as a person and as a political figure was to ask me to dissolve Zambia Must Prosper and make it part,
collapse it into
the UPND as a precondition for any appointment. Now, anybody who does that must have a preconceived idea about how he wants to treat you. Because the moment you collapse your political party into his party, you're basically now saying, we don't exist, I am under this constitution, I am under your reign, and he can fire you anytime, you'll be finished politically. Now, it would be a fool not to see that. I think I was, as grassroots media would say, I was 3 steps ahead. So
thanks to Joseph Chimba.
I saw through that, and I told myself, not here, Bwana. So one day, I called my young brother, Principal Private Secretary,
Bradford
Machila, Council. I said, Bradford, I would like to see the president. This is even before he's finished with his cabinet. I have a president for you anytime, please. Just drive, I'll clear you at the gate. I drove. And I went. He wasn't upstairs. He was in that small room downstairs, just the reception area up. Yes, Mwana. So I said, I've just come to say goodbye. What? I said, I've come to say goodbye. But Mwana, why? I said, my mission, remember what I said, I have come to help you. I have helped. You wanted to be president. You are now president. My mission here is done. I am not getting into your cabinet. I am not collapsing my party into your party. So for me, this is where my alliance association ends. Now, anybody out there can say whatever they want to say. That's as frank as I was. And if Hakainde Hichilema, our president, is honest, he's going to tell you. In that small room, that's what I told him. And I walked out. He walked me out. We shared a few jokes in the corridors. If you have a change of heart, this, I said, you know me, I'm principled enough. When I tell you something, I've made a decision. I'm gone. And that's the end of the story. I've never looked back. I never asked him for a job. I never asked him for money. I never did anything for... There have been some stories which they've tried to cook up, these UPND praise singers. There was some money missing and things and that. Nonsense. Complete nonsense. They can go and put a mic in front of Hakainde, let him say how much money he gave me. He might have given money to the other presidents. He might have given motor vehicles to the other presidents in the alliance. I used my motor vehicles. I used my money. I never asked him for anything. I just helped him. And if he's honest, he would say that. The only money that they seem to be wanting to talk about is I was on the Copper Belt on a campaign trail. And some of our sponsors came to see me and they said, we are trying to organize some money for the alliance. How can we get it across to you? I said, if you can do it in the next 3-4 days when I'm here, that's fine. If you're not, I'm out. Because I've only got 5 radio programs in Chingola, Muflira, Kitwe, Ndola, and like that. And they were waiting for some other monies and things like that. Eventually, I left the Copper Belt. One of them, close to me, phones me when I arrived. And he says, President, we have managed to raise 800,000 kwacha for the alliance. Where do we take it? I said, give me 5 minutes. I called Honorable Mirupe. Do we have an account for the alliance? No. Ask my vice chairman. Honorable Mirupe was chairman of the Council of Presidents. The vice was Honorable Ernest Mwanza. So I called Mwanza. Do we have an account? He says, no, we don't. But what you can do is collect the money in your account. Then you can come and account for it. I said, but from the program I've been given from Community House, I am leaving from here to go to Luapula, Northern, and Muchinga. I have to cover those radio stations and do the campaigns from that side. I know, but we can talk, don't worry. It's okay. So I left with my motor vehicles, with my money. That money was transferred into my account. I left. When I went to Muchinga, Luapula, and Northern Province, what I found on the ground was pathetic, to say the least. You can't win an election in that manner. So I started giving candidates money, food at their campaign centers and things like that. Eventually, when I got back into Lusaka, I was given another program to go and do 3 radio programs in Southern Province. I didn't even stay. When I finished those radio programs, I came back. Luckily for me, every bit of money that I gave out, I made people, candidates at council level, MP level, sign. And the food we bought. So, when we finished the campaigns and everything, Honorable Milupi calls me. KBF, hey, can you come home? He lives along Kablonga Road. I'm in Sable Road. We're both in Kablonga, so we're very close. And Milupi and I, Honorable, I'm his son-in-law. My late older brother, Vakasonde, married his niece, Patricia. So Milupi and I are related through marriage. So I found it easy to go to his home.
Yeah.
I got there and we talked and he says, oh, but there was that money issue. But the manner in which it was portrayed was like I had failed to account. You see, I got upset because to me, I was using my money, my motor vehicles. The only thing the UPND would give me was media team to cover me. Nothing else. Security was mine. Motor vehicles mine. Money was mine. So I said, okay. There was some incidences, and I've got records for this. What I did was this. But because of the way you're coming out, I'm chopping off from my money now. From that money, how much is it? I said, I gave out 250,000 kwacha to candidates, campaign centers and things in Muchinga, in Northern Province and Luapula. These are the candidates I gave money to. You can call them to verify. No, it's okay, it's okay. What's the balance? I said 550. All right, move that money. I said, where to? He says, no, go and give it to Ernest, meaning his deputy in the alliance. I called Bamwanza. Where do I take this money? No, do this and do this. I said, I'll need a receipt. Graciously, so I still have that receipt. Issued by Bamwanza to me, accounting that this money now, the 800 issue, is closed. And the only reason I deducted the 250 was the tone. Because it was like...
It was accusatory.
It was, yes. You were given money by some of our friends and you haven't accounted. When I was talking to Bamwanza, telling him, I'm on a trip. He says, no, you can come and account. And now it's being made to seem like you stolen money. I said, no. If this is the way you relate, then let's do business the way it's supposed to be done. I use my money, my motor vehicles. Wherever the people slept and ate, I paid. So now I'm taking it back. And I took it back. But even when I came back, I still went to Southern Province to go and complete the agenda I had been given. There's a famous picture you would have seen. I was heading south to Livingstone, Choma, and Kalomo to go and do radio programs. I met Hakainde Hichilema coming. This was before the elections. We met at Mazabuka General Hospital. We blocked the road. I was with my convoy. He was with his convoy. There was motor vehicles up to Nakambala Sugar Estate. On my backside, up to, I think, the corner or the roundabout where the police station in Mazabuka is. We met. He started addressing people at the hospital from his rooftop of the car. I also got out of the rooftop of my car and I sat. And there's a picture of me and him and he's addressing people. I was going down south to go and complete the 3-4 radio stations that we needed to finish. And he was insistent. Mwana, they need to see a Bemba man campaigning in Southern Province. Mwana, they need to see this and this. So me, I thought, let's do it. Because as far as I'm concerned, we're showing this sense of unity. And now I come back, I get accused.
That is the 800,000 they talk about.
That is the only money that came from some sponsors.
And from your information, I mean, from what you've given us, it's actually 250 because 550 was surrendered.
I gave them back
to Mr.
Yes.
To Mr. Milupi, who are directed, but
yes.
you gave to Mr. Mwanza.
Yes, and I've got a receipt. And if anybody wants to see I've still got it. And if you're lucky enough one day to have Mwanza sit here, ask him about it.
Yeah.
Ernest Mwanza is a very honest man. He will tell you, because the receipt came from his office. I said, Vamdala, because of the way the language is going now, I need to be protected. I need this receipt. And he issued it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Hichilema has done 3 years. What has happened over the last 3 years? First, he's lost friends like you. Friends like Archbishop Telesfo Mpundu. Friends like Ernest Mwanza and others. The very people that helped him win elections seem to have gone away. What's your reflection of his 3 years?
Disaster.
Why?
Like I said initially, my friend is not a politician. He looks everything through the lens of business. His relationship is transactional. It's what he can get out of you, what you can get out of him. Now in politics, sometimes you must go beyond that. There must be a trust element. There must be a sense of loyalty. If you don't have that, you can't do politics. Because there are people in politics sometimes who are appointed to positions, not because they are qualified, but because they are loyal. That's the sense that you must have. He doesn't, number one. Number two, Hakainde Hichilema, unfortunately, Mwana, I'm sorry, but he never had a vision. Even from the 11 meetings I had with him.
The 10-point plan.
It was fake.
The manifesto.
There was nothing. Mwamba, my friend wanted to be president.
For the sake of being president.
For the sake of being president. That is why we're in this doldrum today. He's not a politician. He does things in the sense of being reactive. He can never be proactive. Because as far as he's concerned, he doesn't understand how much power he is yielding. He doesn't understand what vision a leader must have to carry a nation. What he understands is, now that he's sitting in that seat, he must make money. And unfortunately, not on this platform, but on another platform, when I start my campaign very soon, I will tell him what I know about what he's doing. Because I know there are about 5 to 6 chaps surrounding Hakainde Hichilema. They are controlling the economy of this country. They are controlling the finances of this country. They are controlling the parastatals of this country. I know them. I know where they live. I know what they're doing. I know some of their accounts. I know some of their businesses they're doing on behalf of the president. That will have to come out. Because in politics, you don't go and sit on this perch and you begin to benefit when your people are suffering. No, that's not leadership. That's pure business. It's called greed. Because what you're doing now is to enrich yourself. You can't do that. There's a conflict of interest. When parastatals are under your control, you can't go and benefit. You can't be selling businesses or you can't be selling buildings to the same government which you are heading. Conflict of interest. There's a whole lot of things. So for me, as Zambia Must Prosper, we've let him run for 3 years. We've kept quiet. But the kind of politics I want to play is not this cho-chise that goes on in the newspapers every day. When I speak, Mwamba, I've got facts. And right now, I can tell you, I have those facts. So when we launched the manifesto, and I told the Zambians what we want to do, I also want now to begin not to attack for the sake of attacking. Because part of the problem I have with some of my friends in politics, not that I condemn them, is that they like criticizing, but they offer no solutions. Zambia Must Prosper has given you a manifesto with solutions of how we can revamp this economy. So when we attack Hakainde Hichilema, it is because we have already got the solution. We have already now studied and we know where to attack and where to... I'm going to say, for instance, in the mining sector, a total failure. Would you accept that an entire president of a country, such as Hakainde Hichilema, is to us here in Zambia, would go and pretend to hand over KCM back to Vedanta. But the guy you're handing over to is not there. What does that say, Mwamba? Because if I am going to walk my daughter down the aisle for marriage, I expect the groom to be there.
Standing, waiting.
Waiting for my daughter. He wants to marry her. So this guy wants our mine, but he disrespects the president of this country by not even attending the function. What is it saying to you? I don't care about you. What is it between Vedanta and Hakainde? Leave it for another day. Because we know that their friendship began when he was in the opposition. Now we understand that he can call the shots and the president can be dictated to. Go and do this, and you go and do it because it's coming from the head of state. Everybody says it's official. But the guy you're giving the mines to
you're handing over
snubs
to.
You. If you don't see that as a snub politically, then you're naive.
He touted himself that he's a businessman. He touted himself that he's a farmer. He touted himself as an economic manager. I think all those three have collapsed before him. What do you attribute this to?
Lack of leadership. Lack of leadership, period. Mwamba, let me say this. My friend, unfortunately, sees everything through tunnel vision. Now, in leadership, you must understand that there are certain things that come from the blind side, which you must be open to. There are certain things that come from a bending position, which you must be open to. But if you've got tunnel vision, you're going to have a problem. You said he's a businessman. Hakainde Hichilema, technically, is not a businessman. He's a technocrat. I say this because he has never built anything. Every company he has worked for, he was an employee. He didn't own it. It's not like you come to me and say, how did you start KBF and Partners? I'll tell you. I'll tell you the first building I bought. I'll tell you where the first office was. I'll tell you the first car we bought. Hakainde Hichilema was an employee. Even at Grand Thornton, he was an employee. He didn't own the business. Even the farms that he talks about, he inherited. If he ever owned anything, it was through inheritance. Even the political party he runs today, UPND, he inherited it. He never started it. So, as a businessman, when they say this is the Ford company, this is IBM, this is whatever, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, these are guys who struggled somewhere in a garage building something until it became something. And then you say, oh, that the guy who walks on sticks with no legs who started TikTok, you can trace him and say, this is the guy, he's a billionaire. But he started this app because of what he did somewhere, his eyes aching, and he worked. Hakainde inherits things. Now, if you haven't built something from ground up and you inherit it as a superstructure, you don't know how strong the foundation is. You can't say you're a businessman. You can't even say you're a politician. You're a chancer. He's an opportunist. He wants to take chances, and he has taken those chances. For me, we have had the wrong president for the last 3 years. And unfortunately, because of the Constitution, we're going to have a wrong president until the next 2 years. But thankfully, in the next 2 years, we're going to kick him out. I know some of the tricks they're trying to put up, because sometimes you people in these podcasts and journalists and other people start saying, no, but Zambia must prosper. You keep too quiet. You're not talking. You can't start attacking somebody before you study him. You've got to understand your enemy. That's the mistake some of these people make. They expose themselves too much. We don't talk, but we study. We get information. We understand. So that when we come up with a strategic plan, we understand that here, we're going to bend it like Beckham. It's not going to be Ashos Meru, pooh, shoot. It has to go in a roundabout manner, but it will get there. So now we have the information that we need on him. We know some of the illegal things they've done. We know some of the corrupt things they've gotten into. We know some of the business ventures he's gotten into using fronts and other people. We'll soon begin to expose. And to me, that's politics. Yeah. You've got to be strategic. You don't leave out your arsenals and begin to fire every so often. No. You fire at the right time. And when you hit, it must make a mission and say, this is why. If you're just talking for the sake of talking, people will be saying, he's talking again.
Yeah, there's big concern, and I'm glad that UN report from the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights raised it, like the church have raised it, like LAS has raised it, like the 12 organizations led by Chapter 1 Foundation have raised it, that there's a shrinking democratic space. There is dictatorship that has emerged. And President Hakainde seemed to be determined to control parliament, to control the judiciary, to control ECZ. There is now even some perception that is getting established, that he might likely lose elections in 2026, but with the infrastructure he's putting up, he may not give up power. They might manipulate the results. What do you, when you see that or hear that?
Well, first of all, I've told the Zambians that I've run an organization called Anti-Rigging Zambia.
Yeah.
In terms of elections, I can't divulge too many details here, but we are aware of certain things that they have put up. We are also aware of certain things they have planned to do. But at an appointed time, we shall begin to tell the Zambians.
Yeah.
In terms of the shrinking space, shrinking democratic space, I totally agree. Hakainde Hichilema is not very good at swallowing criticism. If you remember when I spoke of Chiluba, I said one of the greatest attributes I found with Chiluba was that he could take criticism.
Yeah.
I found that even with RB, he allowed people to, Basata would insult him, and even Mwanawasa allowed that up to a certain degree. The point I'm making is Hakainde Hichilema doesn't allow criticism. And the reason for it is he's not a politician. He's a businessman. It's my way or the highway. And that's his problem. So this shrinking democratic space is a danger to us who are in politics, because we see this ugly head of a dictator emerging, and not because the Constitution doesn't provide for guarantees or not because the laws are not there, but because of the character of the individual in the presidency. And that's his problem. You cannot be the one to be allowing people to be arrested for just a TikTok, WhatsApp message. Everything is seditious, everything is espionage, everything. What nonsense is this? We're in a democratic space. If you are in the United States, the First Amendment is free speech. Presidents are insulted. You can't insult Hakainde Hichilema. Presidents are criticized. You can't criticize Hakainde Hichilema. But I've got news for my friend. If he wants to start arresting me, please, Mwana, prepare the jail, because now I'm going to start campaigning. And we are ready to be locked up. And even if you want to arrest me 15 times like you arrested 15 times, I'm prepared to sleep in cells. There are courts that are going to judge whether what I've said is wrong or right. But as long as I've got the facts, I'll tell the Zambians. And one thing I must tell Hakainde Hichilema is this. When you are in the opposition, you are the loudest in talking, in criticizing. Who came and arrested you for speech, for speaking out? Nobody. You insulted Lungu, you insulted the PF. Nobody came to arrest you for that. The things you are arrested for are totally different. So for me, allow the freedom of speech to go. This thing of also trying to use the Public Order Act, no, you can't have meetings, you can't have this. You've got another thing coming. Because as far as I'm concerned, if I give notice to the police, that's enough. That's what the law says. If you want to arrest me for holding a meeting, so be it. Come and arrest me. But this report by the UN rapporteur speaks volumes about the kind of leadership we are faced up with today. And this is the kind of leadership we cannot allow for the next, after 2026. Mwamba, this country will die. Our democracy will shrink. If we're not careful, there will be a one-party state in this country. Because this guy wants all opposition leaders in prison. You can't tell me that what happened to Tito Tela, what happened to Chilangwa, can go without a comment. It's a travesty. In elections, a lot of things happen. The kind of money that they are stealing, and I'm using the term deliberately. I know that my friend, I've told you, the Attorney General is my friend. He was my classmate. The kind of consent orders they are signing in that Ministry of Justice is criminal. People who have signed nolle prosequis from the DPP, a nolle is not the end of a case. You go and compensate them. Which law are you using? Maybe when they taught criminal law, some people were sleeping, but I wasn't. No. The point is, these consent orders will have to be reviewed. And let me warn the people who are receiving money under these consent orders. When Zambia Must Prosper comes to power after 2026, we shall look into those things. Every contract that has been signed, especially to do with our mines, will have to be re-looked at and renegotiated. If we find that it's not beneficial to the Zambian people, we shall cancel it. Every parastatal that has been infringed on or sold or shares stolen or misplaced, we shall re-look at that. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is the same thing that happened with Lap Green. You remember when Zamtel was almost sold, and Wasata said it can't happen. There's no country, Mwamba, which runs without parastatals. The government doesn't necessarily have to be in the business of business. No, but it has to have some companies which it can fall on, which can secure employment for its people and keep the peace and security of the country running. Hakainde Hichilema is doing what I term as privatization reloaded. Quietly, without us noticing it. It can't go on. I'm a lawyer by profession. I've spent the better part of my life defending people. And it is now time to defend this country. This country is being destroyed. This country is being raped economically. We can't allow that. We shall relook and renegotiate every contract. And for any businessman who thinks by going to talk to some of these henchmen that the president has put as fronts and they've cut deals, you've obtained our land, right to our minerals, and you think those things will go in perpetuity, think twice. Because there's a new sheriff in town. And the new sheriff is Zambia Must Prosper.
Wonderful. Before we end our debate, the women cried foul. NGOCC said, you've made women quite fikombola who should just give us children. What did you mean by your statement?
Mwamba, I wish those women would have listened to my entire speech at the manifesto launch. The first thing we declared as Zambia Must Prosper, which I still declare here, is that in Zambia Must Prosper, our women will come first. I gave attributes of our women, and I said our women are most likely to be more accountable where finances are concerned. They are less likely to be corrupt. Our women work for the benefit of communities. Our women work mostly for the community and the nation, because if you look at churches, you look at funerals, you look at weddings, you look at traditional ceremonies, the women are in the forefront. And the women, we must respect them. So we need healthy women. But it was the economic angle that I was looking at. Now, let me say this to NGOCC, because I think they've been looking for a comment from me directly, other than my people. Give me a nation in this world which is prosperous, but without a big population. This country is 752,000 square kilometers. We've got a population of roughly 20 million people. We've got bare land. With the diseases that are coming up, viruses, bacteria, and everything the Muzungu wants to create in the lab and throw it in Africa, we are dying like ants. With the maternal deaths that we have for babies, and the mothers, some of them at giving birth, with the crime rate that we have, what is our population in the next 10 years if we stop producing? Nigeria is said to be the biggest economy in Africa because of its population. Congo is because of its minerals, but the population supports it. Egypt, the same. South Africa, the same. Look at India. Look at China. Look at America. There is no way a country will develop without the human capital. We need a population. Now, with all the diseases that are coming up and everything I've mentioned here, and we begin to die off, the Westerners will walk in, or the Chinese will walk in and say, there are no people here, we're taking over this country. I didn't say the women's job, the only job they have, is to produce children. But I was trying to encourage the women that they should not forget their first and basic role. They are mothers. They are the ones who produce the next generation. And all I said to them is, whether you become a leader politically, whether you become a professional woman or whatever, you must never forget that you also have a role in raising the next generation of leaders, the next generation of customers, the next generation of patients, the next generation of politicians, teachers, policemen, pilots, lawyers, doctors. They come from our mothers. Now, it was also an angle to tell the people that think Zambia Must Prosper is going to entertain gays. No, because when people are getting married, you're fighting gays. We in Zambia Must Prosper will not go and get into bed with anybody who's going to support gay rights. That's not who we are. We are Christians. So if the NGOCC did not listen to my full speech, I invite them to go back to my speech and listen to the very many attributes and praises I gave our women. And it is very, I don't want to use a bad term here, it is very saddening that an organization such as the NGOCC would pick up one statement out of everything I said about women and start attacking that statement. But even that, let me push back now. I want one woman in the NGOCC to tell me, where do children come from? If it's not from the women. So what did I say which is wrong? The question they should have been asking is, was I right? If I'm right, what is wrong with it? The fact that I put it out there? Wanamayo, I'm still repeating. There will be no apology from me on that statement. You have a duty to give us a good population. Let me add this angle. Women have got so many things to fight, Wamamba. Ngatuachita alawama gays. Women will be fighting against men for marriage, number one. But even that, remove this group. There are also men who are sick with diseases. Some we can't even discuss. Those men cannot marry. Or if they marry, they marry tomorrow, they won't produce children. Then there are men who are criminals, who are going to be in jail and other things. Then there are men who are not employed. Which woman wants to be married to a man who's not employed? So women, the population of women will still remain. I'm talking of the men and their problems. Now, if you started off with a number of, say, 500,000 men against 1 million women, when you remove all these groups of men I've talked about, say there are 250. Now you've got 250 men chasing 1 million women. Muchuyemba tutila mbulendume ganjifiarile yandi. Go and give us those children. Not because we're trying to insult you, but we're respecting you, because this is the only channel that our God has given for birth to be brought in, for life to be brought into this world. It's not an insult.
No, I think it's very clear. What are your last words? And I'm so privileged that you've given me this opportunity. Literally, we've written the book of your life. This is like an autobiography.
Well, for me, I'm just happy that you had time to invite us. I'm sorry I couldn't come here earlier. I would have wanted to. But we were preparing for the manifesto launch, and we were also looking at other factors to push us into our campaign now. We are now ready to start the campaign.
Are you joining any alliance?
We are ready for alliances, but the alliances must be based on principle. And they must be based on things that we can see and things that we can discuss beforehand. I've been in an alliance before, and I saw what and how Hakainde Hichilema and the UPND manipulated that alliance. I'm not prepared to go into such an alliance. But if it's an alliance where we sit, we talk and agree, and we put conditions, each one of us on the table, and we say, this is doable, then we can go. No problem.
Okay.
This is for the Zambian, for the benefit of the Zambian people, that we are prepared to do. As long as UPND does not win in 2026, that alliance I'll join.
UPND is such a danger to our country that we shouldn't allow them
to... No, they should not be allowed to go beyond 2026. UPND beyond 2026, this country is finished. There will be no country. There will just be businesses owned by proxies on behalf of somebody.
Yeah. Kelvin Fube Bwalya, KBF, a very prominent lawyer, politician, and is a Christian leader, media personality. Is well known for those campaigns for Michael Chilufya Sata in 2011 and for Edgar Lungu in 2014 and 2016. He leads Zambia Must Prosper Party, is president, and they recently launched a manifesto that you should take time to read. We had him here. We've seen through his lenses our country 60 years as we celebrate Zambia and 60 years. And through his analysis of the presidents, I think you've seen his views and what it means for our country. We are glad you came here, and we are glad we had to celebrate your life and your political life, and we wish you well in your endeavors, especially for 2026.
Thank you, Mwamba.
Thank you.
Thank you, viewers.
God bless you. God bless our country. Until we have another guest, we'll see you. Shalom, shalom.